The sea has always been a stage for ambitious men, but none of them were as completely free as Gol D. Roger, the only pirate who crossed every sea, reached the end of the world, and found something no one was yet capable of imagining. Before being executed, he did not beg, he did not repent, he smiled. "Search for it. I left everything in that place." Those were Roger's last words before his execution. With that, the Great Pirate Era was born, and with it, a question that to this day no one has completely answered. What exactly is the One Piece Woodlands? In the midst of all this, on a small and forgotten island, a boy in a straw hat decided he would be the next king of the pirates. Not for glory, not for wealth. He wanted to be free, and he wanted everyone around him to be free as well. Monkey D. Luffy does not have the body of a hero, nor the mind of a strategist, but he has something few can imitate: the absurd conviction that the right things are worth any price. And throughout the journey, he kept finding people who carried wounds as deep as their dreams. A swordsman with an impossible promise, a navigator who grew up stealing to liberate her village, a liar who never lies when it matters, a world with hierarchies of power that go far beyond what any map shows, secrets buried in a century erased from history, a government that prefers silence over truth. One Piece is not just a story about pirates, it is a story about what people keep inside themselves when the world insists on breaking them. From the very first chapter to the saga being written right now, each arc is a new ocean. Each farewell weighs heavily. Each victory was earned at a real cost. And through many sacrifices, you are ready to set sail on this incredible adventure. This is the complete summary of One Piece, from beginning to the current events, covering every detail, leaving nothing out. Over 1,000 episodes, over 1,000 chapters from the beginning of the journey to the current moment where Luffy is practically a god in terms of power. But look, I'll be honest, this video took an enormous amount of work to summarize. It took weeks of work, but I am a true One Piece fan, so it serves as a tribute. To help the video reach more people, leave a like, drop a comment, it really helps, and most importantly, leave a hype so we can popularize this wonderful work even further. Let's get to the sum. After years of training and honing his skills, learning to control his Akuma no Mi, Luffy decides he is ready to set sail and become a pirate. He gathers his belongings, a small boat, and a barrel full of food, and heads out to sea. Like every journey in life, there's always a humble beginning, and this is Luffy's clumsy start. As soon as he gets on his boat, he encounters the same sea monster that attacked Shanks years ago, costing the pirate his arm. Back then, Luffy was just a boy without the power to fight it, but now he defeats the monster with a single blow. With that, Luffy says goodbye to everyone in Fuchsia village and sets off into the open sea. Soon after, Luffy faces his first challenge, a storm. His small boat can't withstand it and is destroyed. Unable to swim because of his Akuma no Mi, Luffy hides inside a barrel to survive. Amazingly, he survives the storm and ends up being found by some pirates. Pirates from Alvida's crew retrieve the barrel they found and attempt to open it, but it ends up rolling to the feet of a simple boy named Kobe, a timid young man with pink hair. As the pirates get ready to open the barrel, Luffy suddenly wakes up, bursts out of the barrel, shattering the lid, and knocks out one of the pirates. The other two pirates, terrified, carry their unconscious companion to report what happened to Alvida. Meanwhile, Kobe starts talking with Luffy. During their conversation, Kobe explains how the ship operates and shares his own predicament, showing extreme fear of Alvida. In his carefree manner, Luffy declares that he wants to become the Pirate King. Shortly after, Alvida appears from above, breaking through the ship's compartment. Kobe, initially frozen with fear, musters the courage to confront Alvida verbally, even while trembling. Luffy, on the other hand, finds the whole scene amusing. Then a fight breaks out, the entire crew against the Straw Hat Boy. At this point, we see that although Luffy looks like just an ordinary young man, he is incredibly powerful and easily defeats all of Alvida's crew, toying with them. Next comes the showdown against Alvida, the ship's captain, who wields a giant club and is much bigger than Luffy. She strikes Luffy directly on the head. However, to everyone's surprise, Luffy feels nothing because his body is made of rubber and Alvida doesn't have the strength to hurt him. With that, Luffy defeats Alvida with a single punch, sending her flying away. At the end of the chaos, the Marines start attacking the ship. Luffy and Kobe decide to escape, taking a small boat. During their escape, they encounter Nami, who will become a very important character in the future. At first, Luffy and Nami just exchange glances without interacting. Luffy and Kobe didn't know where to go, but after hearing Kobe mention a fearsome and very powerful pirate hunter imprisoned in Shell's town, Luffy becomes intrigued and decides he wants to meet him and recruit him for his crew. Kobe, shocked, argues that it makes no sense for a pirate hunter to join a pirate crew. After sailing for a while, they arrive at the island. There, they start walking, talking, and gathering information about the pirate hunter. However, everyone on the island reacts with fear when the hunter's name or the Marines are mentioned. Roronoa Zoro, despite being incredibly powerful, was imprisoned for a simple yet noble reason. The incident began at a bar when the arrogant son of Morgan, the Marine base captain on the island, caused trouble with a little girl. Seeing the situation, Zoro decided to step in and made a deal. He would agree to be temporarily imprisoned in exchange for the girl's freedom. It was a pact where Zoro wouldn't cause problems and the Marines wouldn't interfere. Upon arriving at the place where Zoro was tied up, Luffy jumps over the wall to get a closer look at the feared pirate hunter. While Zoro was still tied, the girl he helped decides to bring him some food. However, the Marines show up and stomp on the cookies she had prepared. Saddened, the girl leaves. After the Marines are gone, Luffy approaches Zoro to talk. Luffy offers to set him free if Zoro agrees to join his crew. Zoro immediately declines, saying it's absurd for a pirate hunter to become part of a pirate crew. After being turned down, Luffy leaves. At the village bar, he overhears a conversation among the Marines where Morgan's son, Helmeppo, boasts that he plans to execute Zoro and has no intention of honoring their agreement. Hearing this, Luffy becomes enraged and punches Helmeppo in the face, who in turn threatens to have Luffy hanged. But Luffy isn't afraid of these second-rate Marines. He goes back to where Zoro is imprisoned and tells him about the situation. Zoro then makes a proposal. If Luffy retrieves his swords, he'll join Luffy's crew. Without wasting time, Luffy sneaks into the Marine base in his own discreet way to get Zoro's swords. However, being Luffy, he's anything but discreet. He shouts, knocks down enemies, breaks a statue, and creates absolute chaos. Even so, he manages to retrieve the swords, which were kept in Helmeppo's room, the spoiled son of Morgan. Looking out the window, Luffy realizes that Zoro is about to be executed by a firing squad. In a desperate move, he jumps through the window and shields Zoro from the bullet. The shots hit Luffy, but since his body is made of rubber, the bullets bounce back, hitting the enemies. Luffy then hands the swords over to Zoro. Zoro breaks free from the ropes and begins fighting with his 3 swords. A large-scale battle ensues, Zoro and Luffy versus the Marine. Then, Captain Morgan appears. He's an intimidating figure with a steel jaw and an axe-shaped hand. Known as Axe Hand Morgan, he's so strict that even his own son, Helmeppo, couldn't escape his tyranny. However, despite his rank and intimidating appearance, Luffy and Zoro managed to defeat Morgan, knocking him out. Even though they fought against the Marines, the sailors feel relieved and even happy about Morgan's defeat, as he was a cruel captain. After all the chaos, Luffy, Zoro, and Kobe go to eat at the bar. However, the Marines show up again. Surprisingly, they are not to arrest the pirates, but to thank them for defeating Morgan. Luffy then stages a fight with Kobe so that he doesn't appear to be allied with the pirates, allowing Kobe to pursue his dream of joining the Marine. As a result, Kobe is recruited as a Marine apprentice. Luffy and Zoro then set off in a small boat towards the open sea, looking for the next island and hoping to recruit more crew members. This is the start of the crew's formation. They have the captain and the swordsman, but it's far from a real pirate crew, something Zoro wasn't aware of. He thought he was joining a large gang, but it was just the beginning. After a few days at sea, they run out of food. Luffy spots a bird and tries to catch it for roasting to satisfy their hunger, but ends up being caught by the bird instead. While Luffy is carried away in the air, Zoro rows as fast as he can to keep up with his captain. During this, we see the dynamic between the two, with Zoro yelling all sorts of insults at Luffy, given that his captain isn't exactly the brightest. After some time, Luffy is released and falls onto Orange Town, where he meets a woman with orange hair named Nami. He quickly learns that she hates pirates. Despite her disdain for pirates, Nami decides to cooperate with Luffy so they can both escape the island. However, besides being a skilled thief, Nami is also cunning. She betrays Luffy and decides to hand him over to the feared pirate captain, Buggy the Clown, in exchange for the chance to join his crew. Buggy, despite his clownish appearance, is quite dangerous at this early stage of the journey, especially since Luffy is trapped in a cage, unable to defend himself. Buggy then tests Nami's loyalty by ordering her to fire a cannon directly at the cage holding Luffy. Such a blast would be fatal for Luffy, as he is powerless to stop it. However, Nami can't bring herself to follow Buggy's order and refuses to fire. Seizing the opportunity, Luffy manages to escape, sparking a fight against Buggy and his crew. Meanwhile, Zoro battles one of Buggy's swordsmen. During the fight, Luffy's straw hat is slashed by Buggy's knives. After exchanging several blows and words, Luffy ultimately defeats Buggy, who has an Akuma no Mi called the Barabara no Mi, which allows him to split his body into separate parts. Luffy devises a strategy to scatter Buggy's body part, reducing him to a mini bogie, just a floating torso. Luffy then sends him flying with a Gomu Gomu no Bazooka. Looks like Buggy got a free ride far away. All it took was a little push from the Straw Hat, right? With that, the trio, Luffy, Zoro, and Nami, set off for their next destination. And luckily, Nami is a skilled navigator. Now, Luffy and Zoro, who are terrible at navigating, no longer have to worry about steering the ship. Since neither of them were good at it, the group lands on Syrup Village. On this island lives a young liar named Usopp, whose reputation is similar to Pinocchio's, but only in one regard. Usopp's biggest lie, something he's been shouting since childhood, is running through the village yelling that pirates have arrived and an attack is imminent. However, it's always a false alarm, and over time, no one in the village believes him anymore because of his endless tall tales. Usopp's story alludes to the fable of the boy who cried wolf, where much like Usopp, the shepherd would shout that wolves were attacking, but it was always a lie, and when it was finally true, no one believed him. However, Usopp's lies have a sad reason behind them. Usopp's father left him and his mother alone on the island. After that, Usopp's mother fell ill and was bedridden. The only way Usopp could bring some joy to his mother was by telling lies, saying that his father had returned or similar stories. But in time, his mother's illness worsened and she passed away. After this event, Usopp continued to tell his outlandish lies, even if they were unbelievable. Upon arriving on the island, Luffy, Zoro, and Nami realize they need a ship to continue their journey. Luffy has the brilliant idea of asking for a ship from the owners of the large mansion at the top of the village. In the mansion lived a sick girl named Kaya, who was a friend of Usopp. To make her happy, Usopp would tell her lies, just like he did with his mother. However, dark plans were unfolding inside that big house to steal Kaya's fortune. The butler, who seemed very helpful, was actually a pirate named Kuro. He was poisoning Kaya with fake medicine to keep her sick, planning to inherit her entire fortune after her death through a forged will that would leave everything to him. It was all a scheme, but once they discover the truth, Luffy decides to help Usopp take down the threat of Captain Kuro's pirate. Despite a tough fight against Kuro, known as Scissor Hands, Luffy emerges victorious and saves Kaya from certain death. In gratitude, Kaya decides to reward the crew with a ship, much larger and better than the small boat they had been using to sail. The ship had various compartments and many details, but the most special feature was the figurehead with a sheep's head. The name of the ship was Going Merry. Before setting sail, Luffy, who already knew that Usopp dreamed of becoming a brave warrior of the sea, invites him to join the crew. Usopp eagerly accepts. With that, Luffy gains two new companions, a skilled sharpshooter with a penchant for tall tales, and the ship Going Merry. At first, the Going Merry seems like just a simple ship, but in the future, it proves to be a true companion, doing everything it can to help the Straw Hats overcome their adventures. Now, with the ship, a sharpshooter, a swordsman, and a navigator, the crew decides to head for the Grand Line, the most dangerous sea in the world, where Gol D left all his treasures and where the last island, containing the One Piece, is located. Before they set off for the Grand Line, they decide to take a break at a restaurant to fill their stomach. The restaurant is called Barati, a floating establishment. At this floating restaurant, they encounter a peculiar chef named Sanji, who has excellent fighting skills, using only his leg. They also learn about Sanji's past, where he was on a ship that was attacked by a pirate crew, but a storm ended up destroying everything. The interesting part is that the pirate captain, Red Leg Zeph, shares the same dream as the young Sanji, to find the All Blue, a legendary sea where all fish species gather, allowing chefs to cook a variety of exceptional dishes. It's a mythical sea, but no one knows where it is. After the storm, Zeph manages to save young Sanji, and the two are the only survivors, finding themselves stranded on a deserted island. When Sanji wakes up, he sees Zeph, who gives him a small bag of food, while Zeph keeps a much larger bag. The agreement between them was that they would survive without interacting, each staying on opposite sides of the island while hoping for rescue. month, Sanji is extremely thin and decides to confront Zeph to steal his food, believing that Zeph had kept most of it. However, when he attacks, Sanji discovers that Zeph hadn't kept any food at all. The entire supply had been given to Sanji, while the pirate had kept only a bag of treasure, going over a month without eating to save the boy. This is one of the most touching and beautiful moments in the anime, where a stranger sacrifices himself to save a small boy. After escaping this ordeal, they establish Baratie, the floating restaurant, and Sanji decides to work for Zeph as a way of showing gratitude. After going through this experience, Sanji learns a life lesson. No one should go hungry. Everyone deserves to have their hunger satisfied, even if that person is an enemy. Then, the enemy arrives. Don Krieg, a powerful captain with the largest pirate fleet in the East Blue, shows up at Baratie. In reality, Don Krieg's fleet, which had just entered the Grand Line for a mere week, was completely wiped out. So, Don Krieg returns to the East Blue with his tail between his legs. To resupply his ship with food, he tries to restock at Baratie. Don Krieg's fleet was destroyed by a single pirate, Dracula Mihawk the Hawk-Eyed, and incredibly, Mihawk appears at Baratie. Zoro, seeing that Hawkeye Mihawk is in front of him, declares that Mihawk is his rival. Since Zoro dreams of becoming the world's greatest swordsman, he needs to defeat the current strongest swordsman, Mihawk. So, Zoro grabs his swords and charges at Mihawk, challenging him to a duel. Zoro uses all his strength and skills to try and defeat Mihawk. However, Mihawk, with just a small knife that he pulls out from a cross pendant, easily defeats Zoro. Mihawk, seeing that Zoro is worthy, decides to use his grand sword, Yoru, to deliver a final strike. With this, Zoro receives a devastating blow from Mihawk. Defeated and lying on the ground, Zoro raises his sword towards the sky, tears streaming down his face, and vows never to be defeated again until he becomes the world's greatest swordsman. This emotional scene has left a lasting impact on fans to this day. After Zoro and Mihawk's battle, Luffy faces off against Don Krieg, who dons a golden armor covered in spikes and packed with various weapons. However, despite Don Krieg's arsenal of gear and weaponry, nothing can withstand Luffy's powerful punches. Luffy shatters even the formidable armor of this notorious pirate, defeating him in the end. With this, everyone thanks Luffy for saving Baratie from Don Krieg's clutches. During this time, Nami decides to steal the ship and betray the crew. Sanji, who had been invited to join, decides to come along. In an emotional farewell, he kneels down, crying, and bids goodbye to Zeph, the man who was like a father to him, who took care of him and sacrificed his own leg to save him. Now it's off to the next destination. Nami, who had stolen the ship, was heading towards her hometown, where Arlong Park was located, the territory of the tyrant Arlong. Arlong controlled the entire island, demanding high tributes, and anyone who dared to defy him would face dire consequences. Nami's mother, Belmer, stood up to him and met a tragic end. Belmer, who had found Nami and Nojiko when they were very young, didn't have enough money to pay Arlong's high tribute. Despite being unable to pay, she tried to hide her daughters so Arlong wouldn't find them, but he discovered them and killed Belmer. After this cruel act, a very young Nami began working for Arlong, as it seemed like her only option. However, it wasn't a good arrangement, though there was a deal between them. If Nami managed to save up a large sum of money and give it to Arlong, he would leave her village alone. Working tirelessly for Arlong, Nami saved money, and at this point, she had gathered the entire amount needed. However, just as she was about to hand over the money, Arlong betrayed her, tipping off some corrupt marines who came and stole all of her savings. Nami finds herself in a desperate situation. She had saved that money for years without telling anyone. The villagers saw her as an enemy, a traitor, but in truth, Nami was doing her best for them. In a moment of despair, she takes a knife and begins to cut her own tattoo. This is one of the most intense moments in the anime. However, Luffy shows up and places his precious straw hat on Nami's head. This gesture carries deep meaning, as the straw hat is Luffy's greatest treasure, and by giving it to Nami, he shows complete trust in her. Even knowing she had betrayed him, he knew deep down that Nami was still his crewmate. With tears in her eyes, Nami asks Luffy for help. Luffy does not hesitate. He shouts that he will help her and gathers Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp to head towards Arlong Park and cause some chaos, confronting and taking down the tyrant Arlong. Luffy then heads towards Arlong and the two begin to fight. The battle is intense, with Luffy suffering greatly at the hands of the merman, who possesses incredible strength and is very lethal. Meanwhile, the other crew members are fighting Arlong's subordinates and other mermen. At one point, Luffy is trapped with cement on his feet and sent to the bottom of the sea. However, he manages to free himself and returns to Arlong Park to fight the merman again. At the top of Arlong Park, Luffy sees where Nami was forced to work, and upon understanding the full situation, he decides to destroy the place that caused her so much pain. During the fight, Luffy lifts his foot and breaks through the roof of Arlong Park, descending with it, destroying everything, defeating the tyrant Arlong and ending his friend's suffering. Everyone believed Luffy had died in the rubble, but he emerges battered and bruised, and shouts that Nami is his crewmate. This symbolic act is as if Luffy had broken the chains that tied Nami to her dark past and freed the entire island from Arlong's tyranny. With this, Nami no longer needs to gather money, and the village is saved. She no longer has any debts and officially joins the Straw Hat crew as their navigator. Afterward, the crew heads to Logtown, the same city where Gol D, the Pirate King, was executed. In the city, two people are trying to capture Luffy: Buggy, the clown he had defeated, and Smoker, a very powerful marine with an Ikuma no Mi. Luffy gets lost and begins to wander through the city. In a bar, he meets an old man who talks to him. During their conversation, the old man sees in Luffy the resemblance to the former Pirate King, Gol D, hinting that they share a similar appearance. Buggy, looking for Luffy, manages to capture him and locks him up on the execution platform. Luffy, realizing that nothing can be done, smiles, ready to face death. However, clouds begin to gather in the sky, a strong wind blows, and a lightning bolt strikes the execution platform, destroying it. Interestingly, Gol D was executed but smiled at the end, and now Luffy was about to be executed and also smiled. But fate was on Luffy's side. Well, to this day, it's unclear whether it was truly fate or the intervention of someone much more powerful that saved Luffy. There are theories that it was Monkey D. Dragon, but we don't know for sure, as Dragon, Luffy's father, was on the island. After all this confusion, Smoker sees Luffy and decides to capture him using his Logia type Akuma no Mi, the Fuma no Mi, which makes him intangible. At this moment, Luffy couldn't do anything against someone of Smoker's caliber. However, Dragon, Luffy's father, intervenes and stops Smoker, allowing Luffy to escape, but Luffy doesn't notice, and Dragon does this discreetly. Because of this, everyone began to theorize that it was Dragon who struck the lightning on the platform and saved Luffy from Bug. The Straw Hat Pirates managed to leave Logtown safely and decide to head for the Grand Line, making their way toward the Red Line, a rocky mountain that divides the world into two parts and also contains the passage to the Grand Line. On their way to Reverse Mountain, the Straw Hat Pirates make a vow, with each person placing one foot on a barrel and sharing their greatest dream. Luffy, as we know, wants to be the Pirate King. Zoro wants to be the world's greatest swordsman. Sanji wants to find the legendary All Blue Sea. Usopp wants to become a brave warrior of the sea. And Nami wants to create a world map. To pass through Reverse Mountain, one must have a lot of experience, but Nami is a skilled navigator, and they manage to cross despite many difficulties. Upon reaching the crossing, they encounter a wall, but it's not a wall, it's a giant whale that swallows everything. It swallows the ship, and they end up inside the whale. However, inside the whale, they discover a new world with a small island, a sea, and even a sky. Inside the whale, they meet a man named Crocus who tells the story of the whale named Laboon, who has been waiting for a crew that promised to return for over 50 years. But since they haven't returned, the whale feels lonely and frequently bangs its head against the rocks of the Red Line. Later, we learn that this crew was the Rumbar Pirates, and one of the crew members is still alive and eventually joins the Straw Hat Pirate. Well, inside the whale, they receive a lot of information from Crocus, including details about the islands of the Grand Line, how the sea works, and that in order to navigate this sea and reach the last island, a special compass called a log post is required. The last island, which no one has found except Gol D, where the treasure One Piece is located, is called Laugh Tale. And the interesting thing, which we later discover, is that Crocus was part of the Pirate King's crew, though the Straw Hats don't learn this information. Luffy decides to paint the whale with his flag, a rather strange drawing typical of Luffy since he's not very good at drawing, but it's a symbolic act where he leaves his mark on the whale, making it his friend. In a way, we can say the whale becomes part of the crew. They then set sail for the Grand Line and arrive at Whiskey Peak, where upon entering, they are warmly welcomed by the locals with flags cheers, and so on. This island is a meeting point for the Baroque Works, a pirate and mercenary organization. There, they meet a girl from Baroque Works with blue hair. Later, they discover that she is actually Vivi, the princess of a kingdom, who was disguised to gather information within the organization. After befriending her and hearing more about her country's story, Alabasta, which was being overtaken by a Shichibukai named Crocodile, Luffy decides to help her. They set off for Alabasta, and Vivi temporarily joins the crew until her mission is complete. After leaving Skypia, they stop at Little Garden. Little Garden is an island with many prehistoric plants and animals. Additionally, two giants, Dory and Brogy, have been fighting for over 100 years. The interesting thing is that they've been fighting for so long that they no longer even remember the original reason for the fight. They were once part of the Elbaf pirate crew, a mysterious island inhabited by giants, still unknown to this day. Upon seeing the two giants, Usopp befriends them and is further inspired to become a brave warrior of the sea. On the island, some members of Baroque Works attempt to capture Vivi, and the Straw Hats clash with these members of the organization, defeating them but at great cost. During this time, Sanji contacts Mr. Zero, the leader of the organization, via a Dendenmushi, who is revealed to be Crocodile. Additionally, they acquire a log pose, the compass needed to navigate the Grand Line properly. Leaving Little Garden, they realize that Nami is sick due to the bite of an insect that transmits a strong disease, which contaminates the person's body. After 5 days, the end is tragic, as the person cannot survive. To treat Nami, they stop at a snowy island called Drum, an island full of mountains and snow. Upon arriving, the inhabitants refuse to let them in, as they do not trust pirates. However, Vivi, who was born and raised as a princess, is used to dealing with people and asks, even kneeling, for them to allow them entry and treat her companion. Luffy does the same, and thus they are allowed to enter the island. This island is ruled by a tyrant named Wapol. Luffy then carries Nami to the only doctor on the island, Dr. Kureha. Upon arrival, she treats Nami, and during this time, Nami meets a small reindeer who is also a doctor and helps with her treatment. Nami then invites this reindeer to join the crew. Afterward, we learn about the reindeer's past, whose name is Chopper. Chopper is a blue-nosed reindeer who was discriminated against for having this nose. That's all. One day, this reindeer ate a devil fruit, the Hito Hito Nomi model human, which gave him various abilities, including above-average intelligence, the ability to speak, and some transformation. Chopper was isolated and being hunted, and one day, badly injured, he was found by an elderly man, Dr. Hiluluk. This doctor took care of him, and the two spent some time together, during which Dr. Hiluluk gave Chopper the name Chopper. He was the one who named him, and also taught him more about life and shared some knowledge about alternative medicine that he had been researching for years. At one point, Hiluluk told Chopper that the symbol of a skull represents freedom. Additionally, Hiluluk was sick, so Chopper sought a way to cure his master. To do this, he took one of the books and saw an image of a mushroom with a skull on it. Not fully understanding what the skull symbolized in this context, Chopper believed it to be the cure for his master and went after the mushroom. After much effort, he found the mushroom with the same design he had seen in the book and gave it to him. Hiluluk knew that the medicine would harm him, but he accepted it willingly. As a result, the medicine Chopper prepared led to Hiluluk's death. However, it was an accident, and Hiluluk, knowing he didn't have much time left, decided to depart with dignity, leaving behind the following words: "People only die when they are forgotten." Hiluluk's greatest dream was to heal the hearts of all people, and his research was related to Cherry Blossom. After Luffy defeats Wapol, he convinces Chopper to join his crew. Kureha didn't take the idea very well, but after Chopper's departure, she gives him a proper farewell, releasing a substance into the air that resembles cherry blossom as a tribute to Chopper and in memory of Hiluluk. It was a beautiful farewell, and this is one of the most emotional arcs in the story. The Straw Hats then set off for the next island with a new crew member, a very smart and very cute doctor. Now they arrive in Alabasta, a very important arc. The Straw Hats' goal on this island is to defeat and destroy Baroque work. After seeing all the chaos and poverty that Alabasta was suffering, Vivi explains that all of it was caused by Crocodile. Luffy becomes even more determined to defeat Crocodile. Crocodile, knowing that the Straw Hats are in the country, calls for a meeting. In addition to controlling the entire country, one of his goals now is to defeat and destroy the Straw Hat. Upon reaching the city, the Straw Hats encounter Smoker, and Luffy quickly gets into trouble as Smoker and the Straw Hats are arrested by Crocodile. However, a certain person appears to save them, Mr. Princess. It's actually Sanji in disguise, wearing glasses, a very improvised disguise, but one that fooled many people and became a big meme. Luffy then heads to face Crocodile in battle. What he didn't expect is that a Shichibukai is very powerful. If we saw Mihawk face Zoro before, now we're seeing Crocodile face Luffy. Although Crocodile doesn't have the same power level as Mihawk, he still gave Luffy quite a challenge, especially with his Sandlogia fruit, which made him intangible. Luffy couldn't land hits on Crocodile, so he was defeated and impaled by Crocodile's hook. Luffy is left to die in the desert but is saved by someone, Nico Robin. The Straw Hats then have the mission of defeating Crocodile's subordinates. Upon reaching the capital, Luffy thinks of a way to defeat Crocodile. When he was hit, he realized that he was able to touch Crocodile because blood was pouring from his hand. So, Luffy adopts a new strategy. He grabs a barrel of water and heads toward Crocodile. At first, it seems like a useless strategy, but when he engages in battle, he manages to land hits on Crocodile and delivers precise blows. Luffy then faces Crocodile again, but is defeated once more as his body's water is absorbed. However, he survives and with blood dripping from his hand, defeats Crocodile in a sequence of strikes, leaving the Shichibukai motionless. Luffy, the Straw Hat, emerges victorious. After this battle, we uncover another secret of the Grand Line and the world of One Piece, the poneglyphs. These stones contain writings from a lost century, which was erased from history, a story that the world has forgotten. Additionally, there is information about ancient weapons capable of destroying the world. Crocodile believed that one of these weapons was in Alabasta, which is why he had so much interest in the nation, aiming to obtain the ancient weapon and conquer the world. After all the chaos was resolved and Crocodile was defeated, the king of Alabasta, Cobra, Vivi's father, organizes a grand feast for the Straw Hat. In the farewell, as the Straw Hats are leaving, Vivi asks if they will still be companions, and the Straw Hats' response is a symbol. They raise their arms, forming an X, a symbol of unity, which they had made before entering Alabasta due to the power of a certain Baroque Works member who could mimic the appearance of the Straw Hats. After that, fate leads them to the next island. The bounty on the Straw Hats has been increased. Luffy, who previously had a bounty of 30 million berries, saw his bounty rise to 100 million berries. Zoro, who had a bounty of 60 million berries, also had his bounty increased. And don't think the crew stopped growing. Robin, who had been part of Baroque Works and had helped Luffy in the fight against Crocodile, appeared on the ship and asked to join the crew. The other crew members didn't like the idea much, since she had been their enemy not long ago, but Luffy accepted her immediately. Thus, Nico Robin, the last survivor of Ohara, the island of knowledge that studied the lost century and could read the poneglyphs, joined the crew. Now, the Straw Hat Pirates have an archaeologist on their team, and she will be a key player in uncovering the secrets of the lost century and the location of the last island. The next destination is Skypiea. The Straw Hats learn about an island called Jaya, which is close to them. During the journey, they receive a surprise. A giant ship falls from the sky and nearly hits them. Nami's log post points to the sky, and to investigate what happened, some members of the crew dive to explore the mysteries of the ship that fell from the heaven. Meanwhile, they are attacked. In the midst of this, a giant turtle appears, followed by enormous humanoid-shaped shadows with spears and wings. They decide to flee and row as fast as possible to escape, managing to avoid this potential attack. Upon arriving on the island, they head to a bar and talk about the Sky Island. In the middle of the conversation, they are attacked by Bellamy, but to avoid trouble, they don't retaliate. Upon leaving, they encounter a man who initially seems unimportant, but later proves to be a key figure in the story. This man is none other than Marshal D. Teach Blackbeard. He also believes in the Sky Island, something most people don't, and adds that people's dreams never end. After that, they meet a man named Cricket, who says he knows how to reach the Sky Island because he is a descendant of Mont Blanc Noland, who became known worldwide as Noland the Liar. The story of Noland took place a long time ago when he discovered a golden island full of gold and spent some time there. Upon returning to his homeland, he convinced the king to send an expedition to claim all the riches of the island. However, when they arrived, the island had vanished. As a result, Noland was sentenced to death, and his story became known as that of Noland the Liar. Luffy then asks Cricket for help in reaching the Sky Island, firmly believing it exists. They discover that the only way to reach the Sky Island is through a rare ocean current that heads toward the sky. Before departing, Luffy decides to recover Cricket's gold and goes after Bellamy. After Bellamy says a lot of nonsense, Luffy lands a powerful punch, defeating him and smashing Bellamy's face. Additionally, we see another important figure, Don Quixote do Flamingo, among the crowd. Blackbeard also makes his appearance with his crew. Blackbeard looks at Luffy's wanted poster and says Luffy deserves an even bigger bounty. Afterward, they meet a man named Cricket, who says he knows how to reach the Sky Island because he is a descendant of Mont Blanc Nolan, who became known worldwide as Nolan the Liar. The story of Nolan occurred long ago, when he found a golden island full of gold and spent some time there. Upon returning to his homeland, he convinced the king to send an expedition to claim all the riches of the island. However, when they arrived, the island had disappeared. As a result, Nolan was sentenced to death, and his story became known as Nolan the Liar. Luffy then asks Cricket for help in reaching the Sky Island, firmly believing it exists. They discover that the only way to reach the Sky Island is through a rare ocean current that leads toward the sky. Before departing, Luffy decides to recover Cricket's gold and goes after Bellamy. After Bellamy says a lot of nonsense, Luffy delivers a powerful punch, defeating him and smashing Bellamy's face. Additionally, we see another important figure, Don Quixote do Flamingo, in the crowd. Blackbeard makes his appearance with his crew. Blackbeard sees Luffy's wanted poster and says that Luffy deserves a higher bounty. When the confrontation begins, something surprising happens. Enel makes a huge grimace upon discovering that Luffy is his natural opposite because he is made of rubber, and rubber doesn't conduct electricity. So, Luffy has an advantage, but even with this advantage, the battle isn't easy. Luffy suffers a lot to defeat Enel. Enel uses his powers and tricks to trap Luffy with a gold ball on his arms, but Luffy doesn't give up and manages to defeat Enel, landing such a powerful blow that Enel hits the golden bell. Robin then goes toward a poneglyph and reads it. In doing so, she learns the location of an ancient weapon, the weapon Poseidon. Additionally, next to the poneglyph, there was a writing in the same ancient script, signed by Gol D, stating that he had been to the Sky Island. Robin realizes that she needs to read all the poneglyphs to understand the history of the lost century. Furthermore, the true answer lies on the last island, Laugh-Tale. Before leaving the island, the Straw Hats throw a big party and learn about an ancient warrior, the warrior of liberation, Nika. Additionally, before departing, they take a lot of gold, along with a giant golden pillar. It seems that this island has been quite profitable for the Straw Hats. On their way to the next island, they stop at a rather strange island, with long animals and tall trees. There, they meet the pirate Foxy, who challenges them to a game. The loser would lose a crew member. In the first match, Luffy loses Chopper, but later recovers him. Then Luffy decides to participate in another game and loses Chopper again. However, after many twists and turns, he wins the challenge and acquires Foxy's entire crew, only to send them all away and keep just his original companion. What they didn't expect, however, was that someone from the high ranks would appear on the island. It turns out that Admiral Aokiji appears to try to capture Robin. At first, he doesn't seem like a very powerful person, but when he uses his powers, he shows the incredible power of the ice fruit, where with just one touch, he can freeze anyone. Luffy even tries to stop him, but is no match. Aokiji, despite winning the fight, doesn't capture them, letting them go as a gesture of gratitude for Luffy having defeated Crocodile. After this ordeal, they set off for the next island, Water 7. Before reaching it, they encounter a giant frog and also a train that crosses the sea. Once they arrive on the island, everyone gets off the ship, but Zoro stays behind to nap and take care of the boat. While walking through the city, a masked man appears beside Robin and mentions the name CP9. Robin follows this masked man. Meanwhile, Luffy, Usopp, and Nami rent some small boats to explore the city. They manage to exchange all the gold they obtained in Skypia for money, raising 300 million berries. However, things don't go as planned, as they are robbed, and half of that money is stolen by the Frank family, who live in the Frank house. Usopp, trying to recover the money, ends up getting beaten up badly by the Frank family. So Sanji, Zoro, Luffy, and Chopper go to avenge their friend. Additionally, due to all the adventures the Going Merry had endured, the Galila Company did an inspection, and the result was disastrous. They said the ship couldn't be repaired, and even questioned how it was still able to sail in that condition. The crew then had to make a drastic decision. They needed a new ship. When they told Usopp, he didn't like the idea, as he didn't want to say goodbye to the ship that his beloved friend had given them. Thus, a confrontation begins. Luffy versus Usopp. A tense battle between friends. Really a fight. Usopp goes all out. Prepared with equipment he got in Skypia, he manages to inflict some damage on Luffy, but the outcome can't be any different, and Usopp is defeated. Meanwhile, an incident where the city is about to be flooded is about to happen. They have to pass through the city until the flood subsides. Additionally, the city mayor is attacked, and Robin and the Straw Hat Pirates are accused of the crime. However, the real perpetrators are the CP9. CP9 is an organization that answers only to the world government, a secret and very powerful organization. Their goal is to obtain the blueprint of the ancient weapon Pluton, but upon spotting Robin, they change their plans and decide to capture her and take her to Eni's lobby to be executed. In the meantime, we learn about Franky's past. He was a disciple of a very famous shipwright who built the Pirate King's ship, the Oro Jackson. But for having done so, he suffered the relentless justice of the government. In the present, Franky is entrusted with the blueprint of the ancient weapon Pluton, but he burns it in front of the government. After talking with the Straw Hat Pirates and seeing their determination to save their friend Robin, who was captured by the world government, Franky sympathizes and joins them. Once they arrive, the battles begin. Luffy faces Blueno and shows his first attempt at transformation, Gear 2nd, where he increases the speed at which his heart pumps blood, dramatically increasing his speed and turning his body red. Seeing that things were getting serious, Spandam, the commander of the island, uses his authority and says that if they advance, he would call for a Buster Call, a fierce marine attack that would wipe out all the Straw Hat Pirate. Luffy ignores him and orders Sogeking to fire at the world government's flag, declaring war on the government. This Buster Call is the same attack that destroyed Robin's island and erased it from the map. After this act, Luffy yells to Robin, asking if she wants to live, wanting to hear it from her own mouth. Robin is moved and says she wants to live, a touching scene, one of the most memorable in the entire series. Then the battle begins. Zoro fights Kaku, Sanji fights Jabra, Luffy fights Rob Lucci, along with other battles involving the other Straw Hats. The fight against Rob Lucci is intense. Luffy nearly loses and suffers extremely serious injuries. However, he reveals another of his form, Gear 3rd, where he inflates his fist and delivers a massive, lethal blow with his giant fist, in addition to using Gear 2nd frequently during the battle. Even though he wins, Spandam ends up confusing the Denden Mushi and calls for a Buster Call. As a result, several marine ships head towards Eni's lobby to destroy everything. With no escape and the Buster Call approaching, Luffy unable to move, the Straw Hat Pirates are surrounded. Would this be their end? No. In the final moment, Usopp shouts for them to jump into the sea, and in the sea was the Going Merry. Curiously, no one was steering the ship. It made its way to save the Straw Hats of its own accord, and that was the last journey the Going Merry made, as it broke in half along the way. Upon reaching Water 7, a very emotional funeral is held for the ship, and the spirit of the Going Merry speaks with the Straw Hats, saying it was great to adventure with them. One of the saddest scenes and one of the most memorable deaths in One Piece. In Water 7, the Straw Hat Pirates stop to rest, and Franky says he will build a new ship with the strongest wood in the world, which he bought with the money he had stolen from the Straw Hats. This wood is the same material used to build Gol D Roger's ship, the Oro Jackson. In the meantime, a dog-shaped ship appears, and aboard it are some marines. The captain of this ship is Vice Admiral Monkey D. Garp, Luffy's grandfather. Upon arrival, Luffy and Garp have a funny interaction. Garp reveals some things to his grandson. Initially, he doesn't show hostility, wanting to capture Luffy. Additionally, they receive information that their bounties have increased due to the chaos caused on Eni's Lobby Island. Luffy now has a bounty of 300 million berries, Zoro 120 million, Nami on Ulta million, Chopper only 50 berries, poor thing, worth nothing, Usopp, or rather Sogeking, 30 million berries, Sanji, a bounty of 77 million berries, Robin with 79 million berries, and Franky with 44 million berries. Franky announces the new ship of the Straw Hat Pirates, a ship that looks like both a sun and a lion at the same time, called the Thousand Sunny. It's a ship equipped with various tools, including a mini Mary. Franky is then recruited into Luffy's crew, initially against his will, but Robin pulls a magic trick by squeezing Franky's lower parts, so he had no choice but to join the crew by force. In the meantime, a very important scene takes place. Shanks, the red-haired, goes to Whitebeard's ship, one of the 4 emperors of the sea, a meeting between 2 emperors. Shanks is so powerful that parts of the ship begin to wear down with his presence, and many members can't even stand before him. Actually, Most can't resist his aura. The two talk, and Shanks warns Whitebeard that Ace shouldn't go after Blackbeard, as Ace doesn't have enough power to stop him. Whitebeard laughs and says that Ace should pay for the crime he committed within the crew by hurting his own family. Whitebeard calls his crew his sons, and considers them all one big family. The two begin a confrontation, exchanging blows and dueling with swords. They are so powerful that the sky splits in half from the intensity of their attack. Ace finds Blackbeard, and the two begin a fierce battle. Who would win this fight? The Prince of Flames or the King of Darkness? The result was Ace's defeat. Blackbeard's black flames were so intense that they consumed Ace's powers. As a result, Ace was captured, and Blackbeard used him as a bargaining chip to become one of the Shichibukai. Now let's move on to the next arc, Thriller Bark. On their new ship, the Straw Hat Pirates set sail for the next island. During their voyage, they pass through the Florian Triangle region, a stormy and very dangerous area of the sea where insane things happen. It's a place so dark that only a few rays of sunlight can penetrate, and darkness prevails along with constant snowfall. While navigating through this eerie and frightening place, they spot a ship, but it's an abandoned one. As they pass by it, they notice something peculiar and are startled. A skeleton. But it's not just any skeleton. It's a talking skeleton that can move. The name of this skeleton is Brook. Luffy and the Straw Hats talk to him, and he seems friendly. Luffy right away asks if he poops. A pertinent question, right? Well, not really. Brook explains that he is a user of the Akuma no Mi, known as the Revive fruit, which granted him life after death. He was part of the Rumbar Pirates, but all his crewmates were killed, and only Brook survived. He also explains that his shadow was stolen by the Shichibukai Gecko Moria, who controlled the island of Thriller Bark, which was nearby. Luffy then says he will help Brook retrieve his shadow. Arriving at Thriller Bark, something strange happens. Suddenly, several bodies start emerging from the ground, and zombies appear. Moria, seeing that Luffy was on his ship, manages to steal Luffy's shadow and place it into a giant named Oars. The battles then begin. Zoro fights against the legendary swordsman and his ancestor Ryuma, the Sword King, who is said to have defeated a dragon. After defeating him, Zoro receives Ryuma's sword, Shusui, and by the way, Brook's shadow was inside Ryuma. Usopp fights against Perona, a character with the power to bring negativity to people. Sanji faces a character who can turn invisible, named Absalom. Then, all the Straw Hats team up to defeat the giant Oars. They make some progress, but the giant with Luffy's powers is very powerful. When Gecko Moria enters Oars' body, things become even more difficult. At one point, Luffy encounters some people whose shadows were stolen by Moria. They conduct an experiment, placing 100 shadows into Luffy. With this, Luffy acquires the powers and abilities of 100 men, turning blue and reaching the Luffy Nightmare form, a much more powerful state. He is able to confront the giant Oars, becoming so strong that he tosses him around like a doll, despite Oars being gigantic. With the giant defeated, Moria decides to consume several shadows and takes on a grotesque and monstrous appearance, fighting against Luffy. However, Luffy emerges victorious, although very exhausted. As if that wasn't enough, with everyone defeated, another Shichibukai appears, Bartholomew Kuma. After confronting the Shichibukai, only Zoro is left standing. Kuma makes a deal. He extracts all the pain from the Straw Hats and says that if Zoro survives all this pain at once, he would let the Straw Hats go free. Zoro then pushes himself to the limit and absorbs all the pain that Luffy suffered in one go. And let me tell you, it wasn't an easy task. In the end, Zoro stays standing, though severely injured. When Sanji wakes up and asks what happened, Zoro replies, "Nothing happened," taking full responsibility for it. After everything is resolved, the Straw Hats celebrate their victory over Gecko Moria. Then, Brook shares his past and accepts Luffy's invitation to join the crew. As Luffy had always said he wanted a musician was recruited into the crew, a very different kind of musician. With that, the Straw Hats head to the next island, the Sabaody Archipelago. Actually, this isn't an island, but a giant tree, which is why the log pose doesn't point to it. It's a meeting point before entering the new world. The Straw Hats' destination was actually Fishman Island, but they made a stop at Sabaody. On the way, they encountered a mermaid and also the octopus they had confronted in Arlong Park, Hachi. Then they are informed that in order to enter Fishman Island, the Straw Hats need a special process to descend to the depths and access the island. The only place where this process can be done with ships is Sabaody. So they arrive at the archipelago and look for the right person to help with their ship. They meet none other than Silvers Rayleigh, the first mate of the Roger Pirates, one of the people who reached the last island, and knows where Laugh Tale is located. Meanwhile, the mermaid who was with them is kidnapped by the Tenryubito and is being sold at an auction. Luffy and the others find out about it, and in an attempt to stop the auction, Hachi is shot. Seeing this, Luffy becomes furious and charges toward the Tenryubito. With an angry look, Luffy goes all out and delivers a powerful punch, a clean punch to the face of the Tenryubito, crushing his face, venting all his rage, and punishing him for all the harm he caused. However, Luffy's action has serious consequences. Sengoku, knowing what happened, sends an admiral to Sabaody. In addition to Luffy, there were other infamous pirates on the island, known as supernovas, those who would enter the New World and had bounties above 100 million berries. Besides Luffy, Zoro, Kid, Law, Bonnie, and other pirates were part of this select group. The presence of Kizaru made everyone flee, but the Straw Hat crew suffers at the hands of Kizaru, and they were about to be defeated. However, Silver's Rayleigh appears and saves the Straw Hats from the admiral, but things would not be so easy. Several pacifistas, giant robots that shoot laser beams and resemble Bartholomew Kuma, were on the island. Also, Kuma appears on the scene. Then Bartholomew Kuma begins the attack, and with just a single palm strike to each one, he makes the Straw Hats disappear. However, contrary to what Luffy thought, the Straw Hats are not dead. Each of them is sent to a different island. Luffy sees his powerlessness as he couldn't do anything. Luffy is then attacked as well and is sent to Amazon Lily, an island inhabited only by women. Well, this tribe is a warrior tribe with very powerful women, and at its helm is Empress Boa Hancock, a Shichibukai, and unbelievably, Luffy is the first man the women of the island have ever seen in their lives. Meanwhile, a vice admiral is waiting for Boa Hancock to make an invitation. The situation involves a Shichibukai duty, where Boa Hancock is supposed to fight alongside the navy as a war is about to break out. The information given is that this confrontation would be against the strongest man in the world, Whitebeard. Luffy, causing a commotion, runs away from the women of the island and inadvertently ends up in Boa Hancock's castle. In fact, he ends up in Boa Hancock's bathroom while she is taking a bath. Luffy then sees her naked, or rather, from behind. But there's another problem. Hancock has a tattoo on her back that she is ashamed of, as she suffered greatly because of this tattoo, a symbol that marks her as a slave to the Tenryubito. This is not a point of pride for Hancock, and she hides it at all costs. Since men are forbidden on the island, Hancock issues a sentence. Luffy must face a battle to the death against Hancock's sisters, who transform into snake. They possess a zone-type Akuma no Mi. Luffy, captured and restrained, ends up showing a new power, the Conqueror's Haki, which causes some of the women to fall asleep. With this, he wins the battle. Hancock then decides to petrify him, as she has a paramecia type ability called Mero no Mi, where anyone who has lustful or romantic thoughts about her is turned to stone. Hancock tries to use her power on Luffy, but nothing happened. Luffy, in fact, does not feel worldly pleasures when he sees Hancock. The only pleasures Luffy has are sailing, becoming the pirate king, and eating a lot of meat. What a life Luffy leads, right? Because of this, Hancock sees that Luffy is pure-hearted and falls in love with him. Luffy meets the former Empress of Amazon Lily, Gloriosa, and during a conversation, he notices that Ace is mentioned in the newspaper. He learns about the story that Ace is set to be executed and is imprisoned in the maximum security prison of Impel Down. Luffy becomes desperate and asks Boa Hancock to help him reach Impel Down using her Shichibukai title. Hancock eventually agrees and helps Luffy. Seeing that there wouldn't be time to gather his crew, Luffy heads straight to Impel Down. Thanks to Hancock's title, she is able to enter Impel Down without any problem, and Luffy infiltrates the prison. Once inside the maximum security prison, we learn more about this dreadful place. It is divided into 6 levels, with the lower levels housing the most dangerous criminals in the world. Inside the prison, Luffy causes a lot of chaos and even reunites with some friends who are actually far from friendly, including Mr. Tu Bon Clay, Bogey, and surprisingly, they form an alliance and work together in a very funny way. To rescue Ace, they need to reach level 6, where Ace is being held, and with little time left before the execution, they need to act quickly. With each level, the security becomes tougher and the situation gets more difficult. Upon reaching the 4th level, Luffy encounters Magellan, the chief warden, who possesses a very powerful Akuma no Mi, the Doku Doku no Mi, the poison fruit. Luffy faces Magellan but is defeated, as Magellan's Logia powers are extremely strong. Luffy becomes completely poisoned but is saved by Bon Clay. Bon Clay then takes Luffy to a secret floor known as Floor 5.5. On this floor is Ivankov, a member of the Revolutionary Army and an ally of Monkey D. Dragon, Luffy's father. Ivankov helps Luffy recover from the poison by injecting hormones into him. Ivankov discovers that Luffy is actually the son of Monkey D. Dragon and realizes the importance of helping the boy. After more running around, they finally reach level 6 where Ace is kept. However, Ace has already been taken for his execution. Upon hearing this, Jinbei joins Luffy, and then a mysterious figure appears, revealing himself to be Crocodile. At first, Luffy is frightened, but Crocodile proposes an alliance. By freeing Luffy, he would help him escape, as his powers would be extremely useful. Thus, a new alliance is formed. Crocodile and Jinbei, two former Shichibukai, join forces with Luffy to escape from Impel Down. As they ascend, they run into Blackbeard, who used his Shichibukai title to enter Impel Down and recruit new members for his crew, members from the most dangerous level, Level 6 of Impel Down. After Blackbeard talks about Ace, Luffy becomes enraged, activates his second gear, and charges at him, landing a strong punch to Blackbeard's large belly. However, they don't extend the fight, and Blackbeard realizes that it wasn't the right time to engage in battle. Jinbei holds Luffy back, telling him to conserve his strength as the worst was yet to come. Ace's execution was going to be complicated. Magellan appears again to stop Luffy, but Bon Clay takes responsibility and allows the others to escape. By tearing down one of the gates and with Jinbei's help, they head for Marineford. Luffy, Crocodile, Boogie, Jinbei, Mr. 2 Bon Clay, and several prisoners manage to secure a warship. In Marineford, Ace is imprisoned, and more than 100,000 marine soldiers, the 3 admirals, the fleet commander Sengoku, the vice admirals, and the Shichibukai are all present for his execution. Everyone is prepared for the real war that is about to unfold. Just before the execution begins, with Ace kneeling and shackled, Sengoku reveals to everyone that Ace is actually the son of Gol D, the Pirate King, a lost son. Ace denies it fiercely, insisting that he is the son of Whitebeard. As the execution is about to commence, everyone assumes it will be a simple process and wonders if Whitebeard would show up. However, in an epic scene, several ships, including the Moby Dick, emerge from beneath the sea, with Whitebeard leading the charge and followed by numerous allies. The war is about to begin. On one side, the entire marine forces, and on the other, the world's strongest man, his commanders, and allies. Whitebeard then makes his first attack, showing why he is the strongest man in the world. He uses the power of his devil fruit, shattering the air and creating chaos in Marineford. With this attack, tsunamis begin heading toward Marineford, plunging everything into chaos. All of those 100,000 marines are about to suffer from these tsunamis. However, someone appears, Aokiji, who freezes the entire sea, preventing the massive waves from hitting Marineford and averting an even greater disaster. Aokiji tries to attack Whitebeard, but he is stopped and thrown into the sea. Then, Aokiji freezes the entire sea, creating a scenario where it becomes easier for Whitebeard's crew to head toward Marineford. Luffy and his new allies are heading toward Marineford, but they are caught by the tremors and thrown into the tsunami. When the tsunami is frozen, the ship they were on falls from the sky, and in an epic scene, new allies appear in Marineford. Luffy then heads toward Whitebeard and faces the man who is at least 2 or 3 times bigger than him. Whitebeard tells him not to get in the way, but gives him permission and sees that the boy has courage. During this exchange, Luffy still declares that he will become the Pirate King. The boy certainly has courage, doesn't he? After leaving everyone in shock and showing that he has the determination to face the strongest man in the world, Luffy throws himself into the battlefield and goes all out to rescue his brother. On the battlefield, Hancock, although on the side of the Marines, decides to change sides after seeing Luffy, helping him as much as she can and protecting him from various attacks. Luffy tries to do everything he can, and so does Whitebeard. He fights against Kizaru, but his allies step in front. Luffy, running toward the battlefield, sees that his brother is about to be executed. In a desperate move, he screams and activates his Conqueror's Haki, knocking out several Marines who are about to attack him. Everyone sees Luffy's potential and is stunned by the boy's power. With time running out, Luffy grabs the mast of a ship and asks Jinbei to launch him toward the platform. With this, he lands in front of the three admirals in an epic scene, showcasing Luffy's bravery. Even though he is weaker, he doesn't give up and is determined to save his brother at all costs, facing everyone in his way, even the admiral. Luffy heads toward the execution platform to save Ace, and on the way, Crocodile tries to stop him, but he lacks the strength to stop the boy. After Luffy knocks out the two executioners, they need to make a substitution, and in that substitution, Mr. 3 enters as an infiltrator. Additionally, Luffy is aided by several people, such as Crocodile, who, contrary to what everyone thought, doesn't betray him at the last moment and helps a lot in the battle. Arriving at the platform, Luffy finally manages to save Ace, but at the last moment, when he's about to insert the key into Ace's shackles, Kizaru fires and destroys the key that Boa Hancock gave to Luffy. At that moment, Kizaru had the power to destroy Luffy, along with Sengoku, who was standing nearby. However, they gave Luffy a break, but they didn't count on one of the executioners being Mr. 3. Using his powers, he made a new key and gave it to Luffy. With that, Luffy managed to free Ace, finally completing the mission. Ace, the Fire Fist, Luffy's brother, was safe and sound, at least from his public execution. Sengoku came into the situation, took his giant Buddha form, and threw a powerful punch, but Luffy inflated and saved Ace, stopping the blow. The platform was destroyed, but when it hit the ground, Ace was already free. Ace, now freed, used his fire powers to create the symbol of Whitebeard's crew. Inside the symbol of the Jolly Roger, Ace carried Luffy through the air. The mission was now complete, they just had to escape. At this moment, Ace was calm with Luffy, and they only needed to take out a few marines and leave. However, Ace, as always, couldn't resist Akainu's words when he insulted Whitebeard, calling him a failure. Hearing Akainu badmouth his father, Ace decided to confront him, but that wasn't the best idea. Akainu, cunning as ever, went after Luffy, and Ace, who was already weakened after suffering so much, being imprisoned for days and about to be executed with sea prism stone cuffs, wasn't in a condition to do much. So, with Akainu heading toward Luffy, Ace saw no other option but to jump in front of the attack and save his brother. With that, Akainu's lava fist pierces Ace's chest, and he sacrifices himself to save Luffy. Luffy watches in disbelief, hugging his brother, trying to call for help, but by then, it was already too late. The two have a conversation where Ace tells Luffy to thank Whitebeard's crew, laments not seeing Luffy achieve his dream, and then dies. Luffy collapses to the ground, staring at the scene, speechless, and loses consciousness, falling into despair. This despair was so overwhelming that Luffy shut down, froze, becoming motionless and out of his mind. Akainu, seeing this as an opportunity, charges at Luffy, using his powers to finish him off. However, a merman appears. Jinbei saves Luffy, but both take a hit, with Jinbei's body pierced, and Akainu's lava strike even going through Jinbei and hitting Luffy. The attack was so powerful that even passing through Jinbei, it left a huge scar on Luffy's chest. At that moment, what would help the most was a doctor, and then a submarine emerges from the sea, Trafalgar D. Waterlaw. He asks Buggy to bring Jinbei and Luffy to his submarine, as he will treat both of them. During this escape, Whitebeard fights Akainu, consumed with rage, ready to avenge his beloved son. Akainu is powerful, but the world's strongest man is even stronger, delivering blows that crush Akainu and destroy the ground beneath them. Even with Akainu's powerful fruit and Whitebeard's weakened state, Whitebeard lands deadly blows, even burning half of Akainu's skull. But that wasn't enough to stop the world's strongest man, who practically destroys everything in his path to defeat Akainu, even creating a massive crater from the blows he landed on his opponent. To give you an idea of the scale of power, one of Whitebeard's punches destroyed all of Marineford, the Navy HQ, causing it to collapse. Akainu is taken out of the fight, but what Whitebeard didn't expect was that Teach, Blackbeard, would appear on the battlefield at this moment, along with his powerful new members from the 6th level of Impel Down. Then Blackbeard starts fighting Whitebeard. However, Whitebeard, even weakened, was still much stronger. Then Blackbeard uses cunning tactics to try to defeat Newgate at all costs. Already sick, with his advanced age and weakened condition, Newgate begins to falter. However, Blackbeard sees the situation and orders all of his subordinates to attack mercilessly. Seizing the opportunity in a desperate act, they all attack with everything they have: ammunition, swords, and various blows against Whitebeard, who is unable to defend himself. After all those attacks, Everyone believed Whitebeard was dead, but he was still standing and sends a message to Blackbeard telling him that he is not the man Roger expected, and using his last strength, he shouts that One Piece is real, sending a message to the world and motivating pirates even more to find the last island. Sengoku becomes furious at this declaration as it would severely hinder his work in the Navy. Thus, Edward Newgate, the world's strongest man, dies standing, without a single scar on his back, proving that he never ran from the battlefield, facing everything head-on and using his powers. Even in his weakened state, his body didn't fall. Additionally, Kobe awakens a power where he can hear the lament of the people in Marineford. He tries to stop the war by attempting to convince a king. However, Kainu is relentless, and not even a marine could stop him. He moves toward Kobe to finish him off, but this blow is stopped by Shanks, the red-haired, who appears on the battlefield to put an end to the war. Then, his crew members show up, and Shanks declares that he is there to stop the war and that if they refused, they would attack. Who would dare challenge one of the strongest men in the world, if not the strongest currently after Whitebeard's death? Well, the clown Buggy has the courage and says he will start a war against Shanks. However, Shanks brushes it off and says he would give Buggy a treasure, making Buggy happy. Shanks asks Buggy to take the straw hat and return it to Luffy, handing it over to Law, who sets off on the mission to try to escape. However, Aokiji attempts to capture the submarine by freezing the sea, but they manage to escape. Shanks then calls out Blackbeard to face Blackbeard, now much more powerful with his Yami Yami no Mi, Darkness Fruit, and the newly acquired Gura Gura no Mi, Quake Fruit, has stolen Whitebeard's power. He did this by placing a cloak over Edward Newgate's body and stealing his power in a mysterious way. Thus, Edward Newgate, the world's strongest man, dies stand. Sengoku accepts the agreement with Shanks and hands over the bodies of Whitebeard and Ace so they can have a proper funeral. With that, the Marineford War ends with a ceasefire agreement. Hancock then steals a marine ship and tracks down the submarine where Luffy is. Upon finding it, she offers a ride to Luffy and Jinbei to Amazon Lily Island. On the island, Luffy, severely weakened, wakes up after some time, but he's alive, out of his mind, shouting, crying, and unwilling to understand what's happening. He can't accept Ace's death. In fact, Luffy's spirit was completely broken. Ace's death affected the young man deeply. However, Jinbei does everything to help Luffy regain his composure, saying words that bring him back to his senses. To give you an idea of how out of it Luffy was, he was even hitting himself against rocks and trees. Look at the state the boy's in. It's very sad to see Luffy in this condition. Jinbei convinces Luffy, telling him that he has to continue the journey, that there are companions waiting for him. Luffy pulls himself together, but after witnessing everything at Marineford, he realizes he doesn't have the strength to face the vast sea. Rayleigh, who is also on the island, offers to train Luffy. But before the training, they have a mission. They return to Marineford, where Luffy leaves a tattoo, enters Marineford as if nothing happened, pays his respect, throws flowers, and makes a scene to be photographed, sending a message to his crew. On his arm was written 3D2Y, with an X through the 3D, indicating that they wouldn't reunite in 3 days, but in 2 years. When the newspaper reaches the Straw Hat crew, everyone understands the message and sees that they must become stronger to set sail for the new world. During the training, Rayleigh teaches Luffy about the different types of haki, how to use them, and battle strategies. Luffy greatly increases his fighting power, also awakening new abilities consciously, like his hakis. Through this isolated training, Luffy fights against giant animals, improves his armament haki to the point of awakening a new transformation called Gear 4th, the 4th gear, and becomes more proficient in using observation haki. Additionally, each of the Straw Hat pirates ended up in different places. Nami ended up on the floating island of Wutaria, where she trained her skills, enhancing her Klimatact. Zoro ended up on Dracula Mihawk's island, Kuraigana Island, and asked Mihawk to train him. Sanji ended up on the island of Momoiro, in the kingdom of the Okamas, where he trained with Ivankov. Usopp trained on the Boyne archipelago with a new master named Heracles, improving his artillery skills and gathering various carnivorous plants. Frankie ended up on Boljimo Island, in an old Vegapunk lab. After an explosion, he studied some of Vegapunk's notes and further enhanced his body. Chopper ended up in the kingdom of Torino, greatly improving his medical skills and getting stronger. Nico Robin ended up on Tequila Wolf Island, where she was forced to work on building a bridge. However, the revolutionaries invaded the island and freed her. She then joined the Revolutionary Army and trained with them. Chopper was taken to Nakamura Island, where he was mistaken for a demon and became idolized. Later, he was kidnapped by people who put him in a circus, where he performed shows and became famous worldwide as a musician. The reunion point was the same island where they were separated, Sabaody. Gradually, everyone began to return to Sabaody, and surprisingly, Zoro, the most lost, was the first to arrive, but had to leave very soon and had a travel companion, Perona. If he were alone, Zoro would still be looking for Sabaody today. After the return of the characters, following the 2-year training time skip, new looks were introduced. Luffy is much more muscular. Zoro has a scar on his eye and a new look. Sanji appears more mature, at least in appearance, though mentally, nothing has changed. Usopp is more muscular and has a more adult appearance. Nami is more curvaceous, and so is Robin, who also has a different look, especially in her face. Chopper has changed a lot, becoming even cuter and stronger. Brook is cooler than ever, and Frankie, needless to say, has transformed. His body, which was already that of a powerful cyborg, is now a massive robot. Upon arriving in Sabaody, approval is immediate. Several pacifistas are on the island, and Luffy, unlike before, when he needed the entire crew to make a small cut on a pacifista, now dodges all their attacks, using observation haki as if it were nothing, a child's play. He quickly appears next to a pacifista and lands a precise blow, defeating it with a single punch, something unthinkable before the time skip. After training Luffy and leaving him to improve on his own, Rayleigh returned to Sabaody and coated the Sunny with bubbles so they could head to Fishman Island. During this time, the ship was protected by someone, Bartholomew Kuma. One of the last things he did before fully transforming into a robot was protect the Straw Hat ship, and it came at a great cost as he was badly injured. They then set off for the depths of the sea, heading toward Fishman Island. Upon arrival, they meet a woman who speaks of a prophecy, saying that a man with a straw hat would appear and destroy Fishman Island. Additionally, the Fishman Island, ruled by King Neptune, had a threat. The fearsome Hody Jones, a fishman with a revolutionary ideal, preaching the supremacy of fishmen, being stronger than human. Hody Jones's goal was to take control of Fishman Island. He was inspired by Fisher Tiger, a revolutionary who freed many slaves, but unlike Tiger, Hody Jones preached supremacy above all else. He disagreed so strongly with Otohime, the queen of the island, that he killed her to prevent her plan of drawing closer ties with humans from being realized. Luffy learns about all these events and decides that he will help the fishmen rid themselves of Hody Jones. Hody Jones has many allies, 50,000 who come after the Straw Hat Pirates. But Luffy, with his enhanced haki, manages to defeat 50,000 fishmen, who are very powerful, 10 times stronger than an average human, simply using his Conqueror's haki, an incredible feat and a very epic scene. To grow stronger, Hody Jones uses steroids, even changing his appearance. But no matter how much he consumed, he couldn't stand up to Monkey D. Luffy, who defeated him, even in the depths of the sea, Hody's natural habitat. The Noah Ark moves, and the Noah Ark is so powerful that it could destroy Fishman Island. Shirahoshi, the mermaid princess, daughter of Poseidon and Otohime, awakens a power. This is the power of the Poseidon weapon, where she can control the Sea Kings, giant creatures that live in the depths of the sea. With this power, she orders the Sea Kings to pull the Noah Ark away, thus saving the island. At the end of the chaos, Luffy is severely injured and needs a blood transfusion. The only person with the same blood type is Jinbei, who donates blood to Luffy. When Luffy wakes up, he invites Jinbei to join the Straw Hat Pirates, and Jinbei is deeply moved. However, he says that he must resolve some matters before he can join the crew. 2 representatives from Big Mom's crew appear on the island, as Fishman Island was Big Mom's territory. They are there to collect the tribute of sweets that was supposed to be sent to Big Mom. However, when they arrive, everything is gone. Luffy had eaten it all. This causes trouble with Big Mom. Luffy grabs a Denden Mushi that directly connects to Big Mom. He says he's going to execute her rear end, become the Pirate King, and that, from now on, Fishman Island is under the Straw Hat Pirates' territory. Fishman Island has a poneglyph, and Robin discovers an apology from a certain Joy Boy, who will later become increasingly important to the story. Joy Boy apologizes because he couldn't fulfill his promise with Poseidon from back then. So after receiving so much information about the past and the ancient weapons, including Pluto, Poseidon, and now learning about Uranus, the Straw Hat Pirates set sail for the next island. As they navigate the New World, they realize that if the Grand Line was complicated before, the New World is even more challenging. They head to the next island, which is Punk Hazard, an island divided in 2. One side is extremely cold, covered in ice, and the other side is a hell on earth, with fire, lava, and volcanoes. It's a very strange island, and there's a reason for this. The island was the site of the battle between Sakazuki, Akainu, and Kuzan Aokiji, both fighting to determine who would become the fleet admiral and command the entire marine. The result was simple. Magma beat ice. Aokiji lost the fight and ended up losing part of his leg. Akainu became the fleet admiral. Aokiji, disagreeing with this, decided to sever ties with the Marines and become a wanderer. The Straw Hat Pirates split into two groups. One heads to the cold side of the island and the other goes to the hot side. The group that goes to the hot side with Luffy finds a dragon. They defeat the dragon and have a barbecue with it. Crazy, right? The group on the cold side with Chopper, Nami, Sanji, and Frankie gets captured but manages to escape. Each group finds half of a man's body, a mysterious man who was split in half. This was actually Kinemon, who was divided by Law's devil fruit powers and who was also on the island. Kinemon was searching for a certain boy named Momonosuke who had the power to transform into a dragon. Luffy bumps into Law, who is also on the island, and the two have a conversation. Now, Law is a Shichibukai, a title he earned after handing over the hearts of 100 pirates to the Marine. Law has a very interesting ability. He can steal people's hearts, and these hearts are stored in little jars. Pretty crazy, right? Law has a plan in mind and invites Luffy to join him in a scheme to take down one of the 4 emperors of the sea, a pirate alliance. The Straw Hat Pirates warn that pirate alliances always end in betrayal, but Luffy doesn't think twice and immediately accepts the alliance. In fact, he asks Law if he's going to betray him, and Law says no. Luffy accepts. It's very easy to convince him. After all, Luffy is quite innocent, right? Law explains the entire plan to Luffy, and the first step to taking down an emperor is to kidnap a scientist on the island. This scientist is Caesar Clown, the one running the island. To explain the alliance more clearly, Law wants to kidnap Caesar because he makes smiles and weapons that he supplies to Doflamingo, who in turn provides all this to Kaido, one of the 4 emperors, a Yonko. By capturing Caesar, Law would strip Doflamingo of power, and Kaido would turn against Doflamingo. Kaido would lose strength since he wouldn't be getting smiles anymore. Smiles are artificial devil fruits that give powers to those who consume them. Actually, they have a defect. A certain percentage of those who eat the fruit gain the powers of a devil fruit. However, most people start laughing uncontrollably, even when they're sad. That's why they are called smiles. The idea is to make Kaido turn against Doflamingo. So starting the plan, Law heads to destroy the factory, but along the way, he encounters Virgo, a double agent who works for both the Marines and Doflamingo. Virgo is one of the top Haki users, capable of using armament Haki throughout his whole body. However, during the fight, Law shows he's much more powerful and cuts Virgo into several pieces using his Ope Ope no Mi. Law then cuts the main laboratory, which is one of the components for making the smiles, and destroys it. Meanwhile, Luffy is fighting Caesar Clown, the scientist who controls the laboratory. Although Caesar isn't that powerful, his devil fruit, the Gasu Gasu no Mi, which allows him to release poisonous gases, is very troublesome. Luffy struggles, but all the experience he gained in Impel Down, fighting against Magellan, who had deadly poison, gave him an enormous resistance to poison. This provided Luffy with the opportunity to defeat Caesar. With Caesar captured and the laboratory destroyed, the alliance proceeds to the next step of the plan, which takes place in Dressrosa, the island ruled by Don Quixote Doflamingo, one of the best villains in the entire series. Doflamingo heads to Punk Hazard, but when he arrives, everyone is already gone, and he meets Smoker. Smoker tries to stop Doflamingo, but he is no match for him. And just when Doflamingo is about to deliver the final blow, Aokiji appears and stops Doflamingo. In Dressrosa, with Caesar Clown in their possession to be used as leverage, the Alliance plans to destroy all the Smile factories in Dressrosa. The production was carried out by Toys, who were people transformed into toys by Sugar, a member of the Don Quixote family, who controls everyone turned into toys. Additionally, the Mera Mera no Mi, the Flame Flame fruit, was found by Doflamingo. Knowing the Alliance is on the island, Doflamingo decides to host a competition, a tournament, where the winner of all the battles would get the Mera Mera no Mi. Luffy is drawn into this and signs up for the Colosseum Corrida tournament. Luffy disguises himself with a simple costume and changes his name from Luffy to Lucy, just replacing the two F's with a C. At the Colosseum, Luffy meets several other competitors, such as pirates and fighters who were after the powerful fruit, which was consumed by Gol D Roger's son. Luffy defeats many opponents, and at first, because he's small and thin, No one pays attention to Lucy, or rather Luffy, but he makes quite a mess at the Colosseum. Luffy meets some competitors who later become his allies, including Cavendish, Bartolomeo, a huge fan of Luffy, and others. Additionally, just before Luffy wins the tournament, a certain person from the past appears, Sabo, Luffy's long-lost brother, whom Luffy thought had died in the past. Sabo, now a member of the Revolutionary Army, is very powerful. So the two swap clothes and Sabo takes Luffy's place in the fight. Sabo had suffered an accident and was saved by Monkey D. Dragon, Luffy's father. As a result, he became a revolutionary and is now second in command of the army, but he had lost all his memories, which he regained upon hearing the news of Ace's death. Luffy, very emotional, leaves the Mera Mera no Mi in Sabo's hands. Sabo then enters the Colosseum, defeats everyone, and acquires the Mera Mera no Mi. Sabo proves to be very powerful. Meanwhile, back at the island, Doflamingo attempts to negotiate Caesar Clown's exchange with Law. However, things don't go well, and Law is defeated. He also learns that Doflamingo is a Tenryubido, world noble. At this point, we learn about Law's past, which is tied to Doflamingo. Law had suffered greatly from a disease, and one of the few people who truly cared for him was Corazon, Doflamingo's brother. However, Doflamingo killed Corazon. This caused Law immense rage. He was forced to train under the Don Quixote family for years since childhood, but he had one goal: to defeat Doflamingo in the future. We also learn about all the chaos Doflamingo caused. He took the throne of Dressrosa, turned many of the population into toys, and forced them to work on producing the smiles, which was Sugar's power. Anyone turned into a toy would be completely forgotten by everyone who knew them. So if you were transformed into a toy, your family, your mother, father, siblings, grandparents would forget about you entirely. You wouldn't be able to convince them either because they would see you as a crazy toy lying about everything. Moreover, Law's plan was to free all the toys. On the island, there was a tribe called the Tontatas, tiny, incredibly fast beings that no one could see. They were being controlled because their princess was captured by Doflamingo. As a result, they were forced to work in the Smile production. They were very innocent and believed any lie. When Sabo and Robin showed up, they believed all the nonsense, the lies Sabo told them. So Robin, Usopp, Frankie, and one of the toys formed an alliance with the Tontatas and split up to carry out their mission. One of the most important tasks was given to Frankie, who had to destroy the Smile Factory and free all those trapped in it, including many Tontatas. And here's how Frankie defeats the enemy: by kissing her on the mouth. What a thing, right? Frankie, you really are something else. After Sabo wins the Corrida Coliseum by defeating Jesus Burgess, one of Blackbeard's crew members, he fights against Fujitora, and the two are evenly matched. Doflamingo then activates his wire cage, a massive cage that covers the entire island, and shrinks minute by minute until Dressrosa is completely destroyed. These wires are so powerful that even Zoro and Fujitora were unable to stop or cut through them. By this point, Luffy and Doflamingo have already started their battle with Law, and the fight between Luffy and Doflamingo begins. At one point, Law is defeated and Doflamingo attempts to finish him off. However, Luffy prevents this with a heavy blow from Doflamingo, and the two engage in an epic Heiki clash. Although Luffy is already very powerful, he is no match for Doflamingo, so he unleashes his trump card, the fourth gear, Boundman, where he inflates his muscles with air. Additionally, he imbues his body with the Haki of armament, taking on a muscular and bouncy form. His speed increases greatly, allowing him to fly, and his punches become much stronger. Even with his awakened devil fruit powers, turning the environment into strings and wires and attacking Luffy relentlessly, Doflamingo is no match for Boundman, who is far stronger. With this, Doflamingo receives a powerful blow from Luffy that destroys everything around them, and finally, Doflamingo is defeated. In the meantime, other battles are happening, and one of the key fights is Zoro versus the giant Pika, who can assimilate structures into his body, becoming enormous. At one point, Zoro asks one of his allies to throw him toward Pika. He charges in full force and cuts the giant multiple times, ultimately defeating one of the most powerful members of the Don Quixote family, second in strength only to Don Quixote Doflamingo. After that, Dressrosa is saved. The royal family, who rightfully hold the throne, returns to govern the island, and the king proves to be a good ruler. Additionally, the entire family is on the side of good. After defeating Doflamingo, all those who fought alongside Luffy, the allies from the Colosseum, also took part in the battle made a toast, and pledged their loyalty to Monkey D. Luffy. However, Luffy did not want this entire fleet to join his crew, so they formed the Straw Hat Fleet, with the first commander being Cavendish, the second being Bartolomeo, the third commander Sai Ideo, Leo from the Tontata tribe, Hadrudin and Orlumbus, as well as allies like the Riku family, the true nobles of Dressrosa, and King Elisabelo. As a result, after the loot, the Great Straw Hat Fleet was formed, with a total of 5,640 members. The news spread across the world, and the crew moved on to the next island, Zoo, which is actually an island atop a giant wandering elephant. The island is ruled by two minks, a humanoid cat named Nekomamushi and a dog named Inuarashi. One rules during the day and the other at night. To give an idea, the two of them once sailed on Gol D Roger's ship in the past and are extremely powerful. They were weakened, and Zoo had been completely destroyed because the commander Jack, from Kaido's Beast Pirates, attacked the island and used a poisonous gas, decimating Zoo and defeating its inhabitants. Everyone was searching for someone named Raizu, an ally of Kinemon. Despite suffering at Jack's hands, the minks never revealed their allies' location. This was a true sign of loyalty to their alliances. In the middle of the arc, something unexpected happened. Sanji receives a message, being summoned for a wedding. It turns out that Sanji's family is very powerful and formed an alliance where Sanji was supposed to marry Big Mom's daughter. Without saying much, Sanji leaves a letter and heads to Whole Cake Island. Zoo is a very important arc for the information it provides and what's to come. One of the key pieces of information is that Reizu is a ninja who had been hiding on the island. There was a road poneglyph on the island, and it was revealed that the child, Momonosuke, is the heir to a country of samurais called Wano. Wano is ruled by Kaido, who needs to be overthrown to save Wano. Therefore, the ninja, pirate, mink, and samurai alliance is formed to defeat Kaido. The road poneglyph, a red poneglyph, is introduced and contains more important information than regular poneglyph. These poneglyphs indicate the location of the last island, and there are 4 of them, with the Sea Emperors possessing 2, one with Kaido and the other with Big Mom, while the 4th is missing. But before Kaido could be overthrown, Sanji the cook needed to be rescued. The crew is split, with Nami, Brook, Luffy, and Chopper heading to rescue Sanji in Big Mom's territory. The rest of the crew heads directly to Wano to begin their plan. Additionally, 2 minks join as allies for the journey to Whole Cake Island. Upon arriving, Luffy is poisoned with a deadly venom, but Sanji's sister, Reiju, appears and absorbs the venom. When they reach Whole Cake Island, they realize everything is different. They land in Todoland, a place filled with talking creatures, talking trees, talking flowers, and sweets everywhere that talk and walk. It's a crazy territory, and everything seems to be made of sweet. These talking animals are part of the seduction forest and are ready to attack. But Nami remembers that she received a Viver card from Lola, Big Mom's daughter, and this Viver card contains Big Mom's soul, meaning Nami can control the creatures created by Big Mom herself. The first enemy appears, Brûlé, one of Big Mom's daughters, and Charlotte Cracker, a commander. Cracker has the Bisu Bisu no Mi, Cookie fruit, which allows him to create nearly infinite clones. Luffy faces many difficulties. He uses his 4th gear, employs all his powers, but is still outmatched. Just when he is about to be defeated, he has a brilliant idea: to consume the cookies created by Cracker. He activates his 4th gear in Tankman form and defeats Cracker using his belly. It may sound funny, but it was actually pretty epic. In the end, Luffy always finds a way to solve things, even in the strangest ways. Meanwhile, Brook manages to infiltrate Big Mom's house. He finds the road poneglyph and copies it. However, he didn't expect Big Mom to find him. Even though he isn't as powerful as the Yonko, Brook doesn't give up and faces Big Mom, but he doesn't have enough power and is captured by her. At this point, Sanji's past is also revealed. It turns out he was the only one of his siblings who was not created to be perfect and incredibly powerful, as he did not awaken the lineage factor. Because of this, all his siblings and even his father despised him. Sanji suffered greatly in this family and eventually ran away. However, now Sanji's father wanted to force his son into marriage to form an alliance with the Empress of the Seas and increase his military power. With Sanji's past revealed, even though he wanted to return to the crew, he couldn't, because Zeph, his true father, was being threatened. Sanji would have to marry against his will, or else the worst would happen to Zeph and the Bara team. While Sanji was being carried in a carriage, Luffy and Nami found him. Luffy and Sanji have a brief confrontation where Luffy does nothing and Sanji attacks with everything he has. Sanji returns to the carriage and Luffy says he won't leave until Sanji returns, claiming that without him, he couldn't become the Pirate King. Sanji breaks down in tears, but continues on his path while Luffy stays put, waiting for his friend. Soon, a massive fleet of pirates from Big Mom's family is sent to attack Luffy, and Luffy defeats them one by one. However, this takes such a toll on him that he becomes severely hungry, to the point of looking old and withered. In the meantime, Sanji, who had already met Pudding, his bride-to-be, was on his way to her room to deliver flowers. However, he overheard a conversation and discovered that he was being despised and that there was a hidden plan behind the marriage. Sanji breaks down in tears and decides to return to bring food to his true friend, Luffy. Even though the food was battered, Luffy eats it all and says it's delicious. Luffy would never refuse food from his favorite cook. Additionally, Jinbe goes to Big Mom and tells her he wants to leave her crew, confronting her. Big Mom tries to intimidate Jinbe, but he gives an epic response, saying he would never be afraid of a Yonko because he would be part of the Pirate King's crew. With that, Jinbe repays his debt to Big Mom, giving part of his life to her and severing his ties with her crew. Furthermore, Luffy forms an alliance with Capone Beige so that at the wedding tea party, the true plan would be to take down Big Mom. Big Mom had a plan to defeat the Vinsmoke family and take everything they had at the party, but what she didn't expect was that Sanji and Luffy would counterattack. The plan didn't go as they hoped, but Sanji was saved, though the Straw Hat Pirates had to flee. Pedro, one of the mink allies of Luffy, sacrifices himself to stop one of the Sweet Commanders so that everything would go right for everyone. However, he only managed to tear off one of Perospero's arms. Additionally, while they were fleeing, Katakuri, the first commander of Big Mom, even above Cracker, was waiting for them. The confrontation between Luffy and Katakuri began, one of the most epic battles so far, and it was extremely challenging for Luffy. This was because Katakuri's devil fruit, the Mochi Mochi no Mi, did everything Luffy's fruit could do, but with much more effectiveness. Furthermore, Katakuri had a much more advanced haki, both in armament haki and observation haki, being able to see even seconds into the future. The fight between them was insane, and even Luffy activating his fourth gear, Boundman still couldn't match Katakuri's observation haki. Additionally, at one point in the battle, Luffy was injured by one of Katakuri's sisters, but Katakuri, being an honorable man, decides to even the odds by inflicting the same wound on himself. During this part of the fight, Luffy unveils a new transformation, Gear 4th, Snake Man, where his arms become snake-like and unpredictable, giving him a leaner appearance compared to Boundman. With great effort, Luffy defeats Katakuri and emerges victorious, improving his observation haki to the point where it surpasses Katakuri's. With the help of their allies, the Germa and Jinbe, who stays behind to hold off Big Mom's pirates, Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates manage to escape. Jinbe says he will reunite with them in Wano. At this point, Luffy's bounty is raised to 1.5 billion berries. He is now called the 5th Emperor of the Sea. Before heading to the next island, an important meeting takes place between the world's highest noble. Among the kings, together with the world government, the reverie is held. They discuss important world matters and make major decisions. The reverie is held every 4 years. During the meeting, various topics are discussed, and one of the most important is the fate of the Shichibukai. Due to all the chaos they caused, it was decided to abolish the Shichibukai. Additionally, a commotion starts when it is revealed that the empty throne is not in fact empty. The Gorosei are shown heading to a meeting, and a shadow appears, that of Imusama, in a garden, where torn posters of Shirahoshi, Vivi, Luffy, and Blackbeard are seen. Another very interesting detail is the presentation of a frozen straw hat, with Imu staring at the hat and the poster of Luffy. This is one of the greatest mysteries to this day, which has yet to be revealed. Most likely, this hat belonged to the former Joy Boy. The new admiral, known as Green Bull Ryokugyu, is introduced, and he is seen talking with Fujitora. They hear about Vegapunk's new creation, which is intended to replace the world government's corsairs, Shichibukai. Additionally, Sengoku talks about the God Valley incident, and then Shanks enters the room for a meeting with the Gorosei, saying he wanted to discuss a certain pirate. After that, the elders go to Imusama and kneel before Imu on the throne that should have been empty. During this meeting, King Cobra appears and says he knows truths about the Void Sentry. After some revelations, King Cobra is killed. However, the Revolutionary Army, which was attacking the Holy Land, Marijoa, has an infiltrator in the area. This is Sabo, who overhears the entire conversation and attempts to save King Cobra. However, he sees the truth about the Gorosei, their powers, and witnesses the immense power of Imusama. At first, he only sees shadows, and King Cobra also reveals the truth about the D clan. Finally, the Straw Hat Pirates arrive at Wano to free the land of the samurai from the clutches of the dragon, the beast Kaido. Luffy thinks of the island as a difficult one to reach. They have to climb a waterfall, and before they arrive, the ship suffers greatly and is knocked into the sea. However, they manage to reach dry land. Zoro, Usopp, Frankie, Robin, Law, and Kinemon were already in Wano gathering information and starting the plan. Wano was dominated by Kaido, and as Shogun Orochi, who was placed in power by Kaido, ruled Wano. And Wano was a country that had suffered greatly. If all the countries the Straw Hat Pirates had visited so far had suffered, this might have been the worst. Poverty, water pollution due to weapon factories in Wano, and the smiles given to Holdem, where many people laughed non-stop even though they were crying from hunger. There was a caste living in the capital with all the luxury, while the rest of the country suffered without food. A complete chaos, all thanks to the beast Kaido. Luffy then meets a young girl who suffered from all this poverty. This increasingly impacts Luffy, making him want to defeat Kaido even more. Little by little, the plan is set in motion and the characters are being gathered. Additionally, it is revealed that the samurai, Kinemon, Momonosuke, and others are from the past. They are time travelers. 20 years ago, when Wano was attacked by Kaido, they survived and were sent to the current time with the goal of avenging the death of Oden, the former shogun of Wano. In the old castle, which was burned by Kaido, the crew, the allies, Luffy, and Law were gathered on the same mountain. Then, Kaido transforms into a dragon and begins to wreak havoc in the city, attacking the castle ruins with a fire blast from his mouth. Luffy, who was beneath the mountain, saw the destruction and thought his entire crew had been defeated and annihilated. However, Shinobu, a kunoichi, an ally of the samurai, took everyone underground and saved them. Seeing the scene, Luffy didn't hesitate and charged straight at Kaido with everything he had. Thus, we have the fight between Luffy and Kaido in Kuri. Luffy, using all his strength, activating Gear 2, Gear 3, and Gear 4, is unable to cause any damage to Kaido. Or rather, at first, we thought Luffy might have a chance because he landed a few blows that Kaido felt, but in reality, Kaido was drunk and somewhat disoriented. When Kaido regained his senses, Luffy stood no chance and couldn't do anything against the beast. As a result, Luffy is completely defeated and sent to the Udon prison. In this prison, Kairoseki handcuffs are placed on Luffy and he is forced to work relentlessly, even though he is severely injured and weakened. At first, Luffy becomes very weak due to the handcuffs, but he starts getting used to them and gains more strength. As a result, the Udon prison begins to serve as a training ground for Luffy to resist the Kairoseki and grow stronger. Even though he's imprisoned, Luffy views this as training, in contrast to Kaido's plan to break his fighting spirit and force him to join his crew, or rather, serve him, as Kaido has done with others. Luffy then befriends the former daimyo of Wano, named Ryogoro of the Flowers. During this training, Luffy uses advanced armament haki and learns to inflict damage from the inside out with his strikes. This proves to be very useful because Kaido has extremely tough scales and a body that's nearly impossible to penetrate, so this training is essential for Luffy to face Kaido head-on. In the meantime, something tragic happens. Yasui, who was a cheerful man trying to bring happiness to everyone even in tragic circumstances, and at first seemed very foolish, actually had a past of honor. He was a powerful and important daimyo of Wano. He ended up being executed in public by Orochi. Despite the humiliation, Zoro and Sanji intervened to prevent the disgrace from becoming even worse, causing chaos in the flower capital. Otoko, a little girl who had eaten a smile fruit and couldn't stop laughing, tries to revive her father but fails. This is a very sad scene, and the worst part, while crying and witnessing her father's death, she couldn't stop laughing. She laughed even in this tragic moment, and the more she laughed, the more her despair grew. This scene is very heavy and shows the extent of Kaido's influence on the lives of those living in Wano, especially the poor. Momonosuke's sister and Oden's daughter was alive. Meanwhile, Zoro fights Killer, Kid's right-hand man. Killer had consumed a smile fruit and couldn't stop laughing, and the battle between him and Zoro is epic, featuring one of the most beautiful animations in One Piece. Zoro takes a scythe to the chest but manages to defeat Killer. Afterward, Hiyori tends to Zoro's wounds, and the two even fall asleep in an embrace. Quite the moment, right? Zoro got lucky and ended up looking like a princess. But don't think anything inappropriate happened, because nothing did. Kid, who had tried to take on Kaido, was also in Udon prison, imprisoned to have his spirit broken so that he would become one of Kaido's subordinates. Another very important factor is that Big Mom, knowing that Monkey D. Luffy was heading to Wano, decides to go to the country to form an alliance with Kaido. After climbing the waterfall and taming some carp, Big Mom's ship faces a challenge named King, who possesses the Ryuryu no Mi model Pteranodon. Flying, he attacks and knocks Big Mom's ship down, causing her to fall into the depths of the sea. Could this be the end of a Yonkou with a single blow, sinking in the sea? Since she has the Soru Soru no Mi, the soul fruit, she can't swim. However, she somehow washes up on the shore, but when she wakes up, she has lost her memory. The craziest part is that Big Mom ends up becoming gentler and with a somewhat more childish spirit. Then, they take the Empress of the Sea to Udon prison. When she arrives, she creates a huge uproar, but Queen had been sent to Udon because of the rebellion going on, as Luffy and the others had started a commotion inside the prison to escape. Queen gained momentum and, using all his weight, landed a massive headbutt on Big Mom. After this confrontation, Big Mom regained her memory, but to subdue the monstrous woman, they had to wrap her in several layers of kairoseki chains and inject her with tranquilizers because she's tough. But it didn't last long. At least it was enough to get her to Onigashima, where Big Mom meets with Kaido. There, the two form an alliance. At first, they clash, but it's brief, like old friends. In One Piece, everything starts with a confrontation and then turns to friendship. The idea of their alliance is that they are the two greatest living forces in the world of piracy. So if they joined forces, they could find the One Piece. At least they had the power. Well, or do they? Let's see what happens next. Luffy, who had been training, managed to get everyone out of Udon prison, even with Queen doing everything he could to stop him. Queen, who had been throwing toxic and poisonous substances at his opponents, finally encountered a worthy opponent, Chopper, who made a cure for everyone. After that, everyone gathers to begin the attack. The plan, as predicted in the past, was that during the Fire Festival, the Red Scabbards would return and defeat Kaido. So as promised, many samurai from Wano and their allies were gathered for an attack on Onigashima during the Fire Festival. However, before they reached the designated spot, they were ambushed. Among the Red Scabbards was a traitor, Kanjuro, who had been acting for many years, waiting for the right moment to betray everyone. He kidnapped Momonosuke and took him to Onigashima. Upon arriving at Onigashima, all the samurai and allies received new outfits made by Kinemon to make them look like Kaido's subordinates, so that, disguised, their attack would be more effective. Arriving at Onigashima at the festival, one of the first obstacles in the way was Scratchman Apu, one of the supernovas who was an ally of Kaido. Additionally, some of the Toboropo caused quite a bit of trouble. Luffy faces Ulti, a headstrong woman, and he feels it firsthand. A very important figure emerges, Yamato, Kaido's daughter, who identifies as Oden. This is because after reading all the stories about Odin, she developed a deep admiration for him. Because of this, Yamato wants to carry Odin's ideals to future generations. Yamato is very powerful, the daughter of Kaido, with a strong haki and also a mystical devil fruit, the Inu Inu no Mi, which allows her to transform into a wolf and also into a hybrid wolf form, gaining several powers, such as the ability to create ice. This wolf is a divine wolf called Yukishiro no Makami. Upon seeing Luffy, Yamato is reminded of the stories of Odin, where Odin said that Joy Boy would free the borders of Wano. Additionally, Yamato had a friendship with Ace when he passed through the island, and Luffy, being Ace's brother, is yet another reason why Yamato likes Luffy. The Red Scabbards launch an all-out attack on Kaido, using all their powers, but Kaido survives and transforms into a dragon, ascending to the top of Onigashima. With that, the Kaido vs Red Scabbards battle begins, an epic fight where the Scabbards use all their strength. However, the result is tragic. All are completely defeated, even with Inuarashi and Nekomamushi transforming into their Sulong form. They were no match for Kaido. Luffy, at all costs, tries to make his way to the top of Onigashima. Marco faces Big Mom for a while, and also helps Zoro climb to the top of the skull, while Luffy helps the Red Scabbard. As a result, the supernovas meet at the top of Onigashima. Luffy, Zoro, Killer, Kid, and Law, ready to face Kaido and Big Mom. Who will win this fight? The old and powerful generation or the new generation with powerful members who represent the future of piracy? Luffy begins by attacking with his advanced armament Haki, called Rio, and deals damage to Kaido, something he hadn't been able to do before. Kaido is impressed, as he knows this is a special attack. Law and Kid fight against Big Mom, while Luffy goes all out against Kaido. Kaido then begins his plan to bring Onigashima down to the land, to the flower capital. Using his dragon form, he creates clouds and makes Onigashima fly. The idea is to drop Onigashima on top of the flower capital, creating chaos and marking the rise of the new Onigashima, symbolizing the new governance that Kaido would take control of from that moment on. Luffy goes all out to stop him, with Zoro helping. Zoro manages to inflict several wounds on Kaido, causing him damage and even opening a cut, but he ends up getting severely injured. Under the main dome, Queen fights against Chopper, who tries to stop him, but Chopper is no match for Queen. However, Chopper proves to be quite a challenge. Then, Sanji enters the scene to face Kaido's commander. Queen tries to create chaos, shooting scientific bullets that transform everyone into ice creatures, eventually turning them into complete zombies. Chopper does his best to create a medicine to heal everyone, which was a lot of work, but in the end, he succeeds. Thus, the Sanji versus Queen battle begins. Meanwhile, up top, after Luffy makes that huge cut on Kaido, Luffy is defeated by Law, who takes Zoro downstairs, leaving him alone with Kaido. At this point in the story, Big Mom had also separated from Kaido. With that, Luffy begins a fight against Kaido, while Zoro, severely injured, receives medical treatment. But there's a problem. Another very powerful commander remains king. While Zoro is being treated, he learns of a medicine that would heal him at first but cause a lot more pain afterward. He agrees to the treatment in order to return to the fight. Thus, he begins his battle against Queen. Luffy had been defeated and sent to the depths of the sea. However, he was saved by Law's crew and then received food. With that, Luffy returns to the top of Onigashima, accompanied by Momonosuke, who had transformed into an adult dragon thanks to Shinobu's powers. While Luffy was defeated down below, Yamato takes the lead and fights against Kaido, but her power is not enough, though she gives her father a good challenge. When Luffy returns, a new battle begins, with Momonosuke helping in the fight. At one point, Zunisha starts walking toward Wano, but Luffy is defeated once again, now with the interference of a CP0 agent, who stops Luffy so Kaido can land a decisive blow. With that, Luffy falls to the ground and his death is announced. That's right, Luffy is dead. Kaido is not happy about this idea, as he appreciates a fair fight, especially seeing such a powerful young man. He takes his anger out on the CP0 agent. Meanwhile, beneath Onigashima, Law and Kid fight against Big Mom. Both use their awakened devil fruit powers. They go all out and, with great effort, manage to defeat Big Mom, sending her to the depths of Wano, into the lava. With that, Big Mom is completely defeated and killed. However, Luffy starts making strange noises. His body begins to move and his heart starts beating. Drum-like sounds begin to emerge and Luffy starts to rise unconsciously. It is at this moment that Luffy's devil fruit awakens and forces him back to life. Zunisha, who is walking toward Wano, says that Joy Boy has returned. Luffy awakens a new power, a completely different form from anything we've seen before. This form is Gear 5th, and Luffy becomes a white warrior. Luffy, emitting haki everywhere, is much stronger. With Luffy's supposed death, Kaido begins attacking Onigashima, stating that he will destroy everything and defeat everyone. However, Luffy extends his huge hand and pulls Kaido in dragon form upwards. Now the battle begins. Luffy, with his new powers, begins to laugh playfully and bounce around. According to Luffy, this form makes him feel free and joyful. As a result, he becomes even more powerful, turning the environment into rubber and doing things beyond imagination, resembling a cartoon. Luffy's power was so great that he managed to jump rope with Kaido's massive body. Additionally, Luffy lands multiple and continuous blows on Kaido. A new battle unfolds: Kaido, the Beast Demon, versus Luffy, the God Nika, Joy Boy, the warrior of liberation. Luffy was so powerful that when Kaido swallowed him, his hands came out of Kaido's eyes. Furthermore, Luffy managed to turn Kaido into a balloon. When Kaido unleashed a heat breath toward Luffy, he simply grabbed the ground and deflected the breath, turning it into rubber. Luffy also managed to grab a lightning bolt and throw it at Kaido. Simply absurd. Luffy activates a giant form while Kaido transforms into an enormous dragon made of lava. Luffy grabs Kaido, creates a gigantic hand the size of Onigashima's skull and delivers a massive punch, sending Kaido deep into the lava sea of Wano. With that, we have a winner. Luffy, the Straw Hat, the warrior of liberation, Joy Boy, wins the fight. Kaido, the beast demon who caused so much chaos in Wano, is finally defeated and killed. Afterward, Luffy collapses on the ground and Sanji awakens his lineage factor, defeating Queen and igniting a blue fire in his leg. Zoro activates Advanced Conqueror's Haki and defeats King, discovering how to defeat the Lunarian. Additionally, we learn that Luffy's devil fruit is the Hito Hito no Mi, which had been hidden and erased from history by the government as it was Joy Boy's fruit, and according to the Gorosei, its powers were absurd. The Gorosei also mentioned that the fruit seemed to have a will of its own, eluding both them and the world government. Upon hearing this, Shanks steals the fruit from the Marine's ship. However, the fruit ends up in Luffy's hands. This essentially implies that the fruit chose Luffy. Following this, a grand celebration begins after the events of the battle. The year was now free, and the terror was over, so all that remained was to celebrate. While they were resting, a very powerful figure appears. Admiral Ryokugyu arrives to try to capture everyone. He fights Queen and King and wins. The Red Scabbards try to stop him, however they are no match, but from a distance, Shanks activates his Conqueror's Haki and makes Ryokugyu tremble, driving the Admiral away. Shanks knew that if he fought Ryokugyu at that moment, he would be defeated. Shanks says that it is not yet time to meet Luffy, but asks Ben Beckman if it is time for them to meet Luffy. After that, Luffy, Law, and Kid compete to decide which island each of them will go to. Before leaving, Luffy talks to Momonosuke and claims the year as his territory, giving them a flag to raise in Wano, in the flower capital. Additionally, new bounties are announced, with Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and the entire Straw Hat crew having their bounties increased. Luffy is now considered a Yonko, an Emperor of the Sea. Furthermore, Kid and Law's bounties, just like Luffy's, rise to 3 billion berries. Another piece of news spreads. Sabo is accused of being the assassin of King Cobra. However, as I explained before, this occurred because the Gorosei and Imusama attacked Cobra, and Sabo witnessed everything. As a result, Sabo manages to escape, and the world government decides to activate the Mother Flame, a powerful weapon that wiped Lulusia off the map, thinking that Sabo was on that island. Vivi and Wapol manage to escape the reverie and are taken in by Morgan. In Amazon Lily, the Marines sent forces to capture Boa Hancock due to the abolition of the Shichibukai, including some Marines and Seraphim. The Seraphim are essentially clones of the Shichibukai, but more powerful. As if that wasn't enough, Blackbeard seizes the moment to try to capture Boa Hancock and steal her powers. He causes chaos but is stopped by Rayleigh, who uses his Conqueror's Haki to drive Blackbeard away. In the end, Blackbeard manages to escape with some Marines in tow, but Kobe volunteers to be swapped with those Marines. As they leave Wano, the Straw Hat Pirates head to Egghead, the island of the future. There, they meet a woman who claims to be Vegapunk, but in reality, Vegapunk is divided into several parts, each with its own distinct personality. The main part of Vegapunk resembles Einstein. Pretty cool, right? Upon arriving at Egghead, they split up and Luffy encounters Jewelry Bonnie, who says she is searching for her father. They then discover that her father is Bartholomew Kuma. After some time, they find a clone of Jimbei, which is actually a Seraphim. Additionally, on Egghead, they learn a lot of new information, including the existence of a giant robot created during the Lost Century. It was also revealed that the Kingdom of the Lost Century, the Great Kingdom, was a very powerful and scientific civilization where the technology they possessed was much more advanced than the current one. Vegapunk also shares more about Ohara and says that all the books are stored in Elbaf. When Vegapunk visited Elbaf and read all the books, he learned about more events from the Lost Century, and the world government, knowing that Vegapunk knew the truth, decided to eliminate him and send CP0 after him. On the Revolutionary Army's island, Kuma was being repaired, but he is activated and heads toward Mariejwa, causing chaos. Akainu goes to stop Kuma, but Kuma then flies off in a certain direction. Later, we learn that Kuma headed to Egghead. When Rob Lucci arrives on the island, Luffy encounters him and activates Gear 5, and the two engage in a battle. In the end, the Straw Hat Pirates defeat Cypher Paul and the Seraphim, resolving the situation. Meanwhile, Garp decides to rescue Kobe from Hachinosu Island, the pirate island under Blackbeard's control. With some Marines, he heads to the island, and Garp, flying from the sky, arrives already delivering a massive Haki attack, causing much destruction. Garp shows off his powers, and the old man is incredibly powerful. However, in the end, Garp is defeated and suffers damage from Shiryu of the Rain and also from Akainu, who drives an ice stake into his chest. In this battle, Kobe also demonstrates that he is Garp's disciple and has trained hard with him, showing that he can create huge bursts of haki, strong enough to destroy the massive hand of one of Blackbeard's crew. The others on the island manage to escape, but it is announced that Kobe's fate is unknown. Additionally, something very important happens in the world. Crocodile, Buggy, and Mihawk joined forces. In fact, Crocodile and Draco Mihawk went to collect a debt from Bogey, but Buggy convinces them to ally. They form the Cross Guild, an organization that hunts Marine, putting bounties on them. When Buggy's subordinates were sending out the poster announcing the Cross Guild, they placed Buggy in the center, larger than Beehawk and Crocodile. As a result, the Marines assumed Buggy was behind it all, and the leader deciding to make him a Yonko. Additionally, Kuma's past is revealed. Kuma and Ivankov were in God Valley, where a tournament was held in which the Celestial Dragons exterminated everyone living on the island. However, they managed to send a signal to the world about the island, and that's when the Rocks pirates went to God Valley. After several events, Kuma ate the pawpaw fruit and they managed to escape, heading to an island where Kuma and Ginny continued their lives. It is also revealed that Dragon was once a Marine and broke away from the Navy. At a certain point, Kuma, like Jinbei, joined the Revolutionary Army. Jinbei wanted to marry Kuma, but Kuma refused, knowing his race was hunted by the world. At one point, Jinbei is captured by a world noble and spends years there. However, she is discarded after developing an illness and returns with a daughter. That daughter is Jewelry Bonnie. Kuma does everything he can, but he can't save Jinbei, and she passes away. Kuma then decides to raise Bonnie as his own daughter, but Bonnie also has the same illness as her mother, and Kuma desperately tries to save his daughter from the disease. Kuma begins to work even more for the Revolutionary Army, seeking a cure for Bonnie. Kuma then makes an agreement with Vegapunk, where Vegapunk would clone Kuma in exchange for saving Bonnie. After many experiments, Kuma loses his consciousness. Returning to recent events, Kizaru, the Gorosei, and several vice admirals and ships attack Egghead to eliminate Vegapunk and the Straw Hat Pirate. As a result, Kizaru and Luffy fight, and Luffy manages to land a lethal blow on Kizaru, who collapses unconscious. However, Luffy can't hold on and loses his strength as well. After this, the Gorosei attacks everyone and shows their immense power. No one was a match for them, but then someone appears. Kuma was traveling towards Egghead and uses his last strength to confront the Gorosei. Luffy is given food and regains his strength, confronting Kizaru and the Gorosei with Sanji and Garcia. Additionally, Zoro fights against Rob Lucci. Vegapunk is then killed by Kizaru, but he programs a message for the world. Luffy grows huge and delivers powerful attacks against Kizaru and the Gorosei with Sanji and Garcia. The Gorosei see no other option and summon the other Gorosei, who appear on Egghead, revealing their true form, and so a new battle begins. Immediately after, Jinbei arrived to reinforce the assault, creating an opening that allowed both of them to reunite with the crew. Meanwhile, Mars found Rob Lucci gravely wounded, and upon understanding what was happening on Egghead, headed for the Labo phase. There he freed York and attempted to stop Vegapunk's transmission by destroying the room with a lightning strike. Even so, the transmission remained active. Mars and York then continued their search. Unaware of Stussy's presence, she was hiding in the area and breathed a sigh of relief at not being discovered. Shortly after, Mars managed to access the Punk records and located the Denden Mushi responsible for the transmission, destroying it with a single blow. Even so, Vegapunk's message continued to broadcast. Outside, Luffy was simultaneously facing 3 members of the Gorosei, until the giants Dory and Brogy arrived to aid him. Surprised and thrilled to see them, Luffy stressed that the priority was to escape from Egghead. At the same time, the Marines reported that an iron giant had emerged from the island. The Straw Hat crew, for their part, was positioning the Thousand Sunny and Atlas to begin the getaway. Edison reported that Stacy was willing to stay in the control room to deactivate the dome, allowing the crew to withdraw. It was then that Vegapunk's final message began. The scientist confessed that he had committed 2 unforgivable sins which, according to him, justified his execution. Before dying, he had programmed one last broadcast. Vegapunk explained that his message was not meant to point fingers at anyone, but rather to bring the truth to light. He began by revealing something shocking. The world was on the verge of being swallowed by the ocean. In desperation, Saturn raced to the energy station where the mother flame was kept, in an attempt to stop the transmission. Even so, Vegapunk pressed on. He said that in order to understand the world's fate, it was essential to understand the Void Century, a period erased from history whose only key lay in the poneglyphs scattered across the world. Vegapunk revealed that the world government had forbidden their decipherment, but he had defied that order thanks to the knowledge inherited from the scholars of Ohara. With that, he revealed to the world what he had discovered. 900 years ago, there existed a man named Joy Boy, leader of an extraordinarily advanced kingdom, who fought with a rubber-like body similar to that of the sun god Nika of Elbaf's legends. Joy Boy would have been the first to set sail in pursuit of freedom, and for that reason was called a pirate. He went to war against 20 kingdoms, which would later unite to form the world government. According to Vegapunk, it is impossible to determine who was right or wrong, only that it was a conflict between opposing ideologies. Joy Boy's kingdom possessed technology so advanced that its weapons could not be reproduced in the current era. This war culminated in Joy Boy's defeat and the end of the Void Century. While the message continued, the crew noticed that dense clouds were extending beyond Egghead. It was the result of Edison's sacrifice, which allowed the Thousand Sunny to reach the sea. From the lab, Edison contacted Stasi so she could deactivate the containment barrier. She then asked whether she could free Kaku, to which Edison raised no objection. On another front, Bonnie and her group reached the giant's ship, but were intercepted by Nusujuro, who appeared to block their escape. With a brutal strike of his sword, he was able to cut the Labophase in half, causing the Seraphim and several CP0 agents to fall along with the wreckage. Finally, Vegapunk declared that the currently habitable areas of the planet are merely remnants of the vast lands that once existed. According to him, sea levels had risen by approximately 200 meters, a phenomenon that could not have occurred naturally. In other words, the rise in sea level was not a natural phenomenon, but rather the direct result of human action. More precisely, the use of the ancient weapons, which still exist to this day and represent a threat of even greater destruction. According to Vegapunk, the Great War waged 900 years ago never truly came to an end. It was then that the scientist revealed his greatest dream, to create an energy source capable of benefiting all of humanity, the Mother Flame. However, his project was not yet complete. A fragment of that energy had been stolen, and Vegapunk suspected it had been used to activate one of the ancient weapons and destroy the kingdom of Luluzia. Feeling responsible, he apologized to the world for having contributed to the creation of the Mother Flame. He then mentioned the existence of 3 ancient weapons, revealing that Joy Boy had chosen to preserve them for the future, though the reasons behind that decision remain unknown. Vegapunk stated that the answers would come soon. He also shared that the Roger Pirates were among the very few who knew the full truth about the Void Century, but had decided not to share it with the world. As the transmission continued, York finally discovered the location of the Denden Mushi responsible for the broadcast. It was hidden inside the Iron Giant. Without hesitation, York alerted the 5 elders. Outside the Labophase, the barrier was deactivated, allowing the Straw Hats to prepare for their escape. Zoro and Jinbei arrived at the location, but Nusujuro positioned himself to attack them. Zoro, however, managed to intercept the blow in time. On the northeast coast, the crew noticed that the Gorosei had stopped pursuing them, which facilitated their withdrawal. Following York's revelation, the 5 elders redirected their attention to the Iron Giant. Vegapunk, meanwhile, continued with his final speech, stating that he still had one last message directed at those who carry the D in their names. But before he could reveal it, one of the Gorosei attacked the giant, cutting off the transmission. The robot was hurled into the depths of the sea. Afterward, the elders interrogated York about which of Vegapunk's satellites were still alive. She informed them that only Lilith and Atlas had survived, and the Gorosei decided to eliminate them. At that moment, Mars took flight toward the giant's ship, firing a wave of flames and proclaiming that no one would escape from there. Meanwhile, after recovering with a good meal, Luffy was able to activate Gear 5 once again. Inspired by his determination, he encouraged Bonnie to fight at his side. The young girl then used her power to envision a future in which she was in her freest form, transforming into a figure similar to Luffy's own. Together, the two prepared to face Mars. Luffy's presence could be felt not only by the other Gorosei, but also by the Iron Giant. In the lab, Stussy freed Kaku, who warned that even though they had once been allies, he he would not be able to protect her from Rob Lucci. On the giant's ship, Mars kept up his relentless assault, but Luffy, inflated in his Gear 5 form, coordinated a powerful attack with the help of his companions, managing to repel the enemy. On the northeast coast, Mars attempted once more to destroy the ship. However, the Iron Giant emerged from the sea and struck him with such force that it broke his fangs. The action was motivated by Luffy's presence, which caused the robot to recall a conversation with Joy Boy, revealing that his true name was Emeth. At the top of the Labo phase, Lilith attempted to prevent the Thousand Sunny from launching, claiming they still needed to neutralize Nusjuro to ensure a safe escape. Surprisingly, Atlas struck Lilith with a precise blow, leaving her unconscious. She then asked the Straw Hats to take care of her companion and declared that she would face Nusjuro alone. With that, the crew prepared to depart, while Atlas sacrificed herself to clear the path for the Sunny. Amid all of this, York was celebrating the fact that she was the last surviving Vegapunk. However, the five elders reminded her that their primary mission was still to stop Vegapunk's transmission. It was then that Saturn leapt onto the giant's ship to confront Luffy and the others. However, Boni, in her form inspired by the sun god Nika, joined forces with Luffy, and the two unleashed a barrage of punches that sent Saturn flying. Vegapunk returned to the transmission with his final message. One day, the full truth about the Void Century would come to light. He also mentioned that people of rare racial lineages are persecuted by the world government, though the reason remains unknown. Finally, he left one last reflection. The fate of the world will depend on those who are able to find the One Piece. As the transmission concluded, Warkari launched a devastating attack against Emeth, destroying the Denden Mushi responsible for the message, and cutting off the broadcast for good. Before shutting down completely, the giant robot apologized to Luffy for not being able to make him a king, and thanked him for having let him hear the drums of liberation one last time. To everyone's surprise, Emeth then released the most powerful conqueror's haki of Joy Boy, a power that had lain dormant within him since the Void Century. The wave of haki was so intense that it triggered a colossal explosion, knocking out countless marines and forcing the Gorosei to dissolve their demonic forms and immediately return to Mary GOC, leaving only Saturn behind on the island. Even Imu felt the impact of the energy and recognized the haki as Joy Boys. With his energy completely depleted, Emeth shut down for good. With the Marines out of combat, the Straw Hats and the warriors of Elbaf seized the opportunity to escape from Egghead and celebrated their successful getaway. Meanwhile, Sanji found Vegapunk's body and reflected on whether all of it had been planned by the scientist from the very beginning, given the content revealed through the broadcast. Going back 2 weeks in time, that was the moment when Vegapunk, Shaka, and Pythagoras discovered that a fragment of the Mother Flame had been stolen. After investigations and analysis, they concluded that York was behind the theft and that she was in direct contact with the world government, attempting to conceal her betrayal. The following day, the group confirmed that York had handed the fragment over to the government, which used the weapon to destroy the kingdom of Lulusia. Aware that he did not have much time left to live, Vegapunk decided to ensure that his death would have a purpose. 2 days before the current events, he recorded a final message, hiding it inside Emeth, trusting that no one would discover it. To keep the plan secret, the three, Vegapunk, Shaka, and Pythagoras, erased their own memories, preserving only partial information about the world government's actions. Later, during the siege on the island, Vegapunk confided in Sanji that he did not want to be saved because his death would serve as a catalyst for something far greater. He also expressed the wish that the Straw Hats would be the ones responsible for finding the legendary treasure, the One Piece. Back in the present, as Sentomaru fled the island in a small boat, the Marines were trying to reorient themselves. It was then that Akainu made contact, demanding a full report on the events at Egghead. Kizaru answered the call and informed him that he would respond once the soldiers had recovered, which led Akainu to accuse him of negligence. In response, Kizaru confronted him, asking whether he had ever been forced to kill his best friend. While the wounded were regrouping, Rob Lucci lied by claiming he had eliminated Stasi. Despite the government having obtained the Mother Flame, the Punk Records data, and the Energy Core along with York, Saturn considered the greatest failure to be the fact that Vegapunk's message had been broadcast to the entire world. When Vice Admiral Doberman questioned the validity of the message, Saturn reacted with fury and attacked him violently. In Mary Geo's, Garling informed the other elders that he had received special orders. York would now be under his direct authority, and he would be taking a position among the 5 elders with expanded powers. Shortly after, in a sudden and mysterious development, Saturn's body began to burn and decompose while he was still on Egghead. Imu, disappointed with the subordinates' failure to capture Luffy, did not forgive his mistake, even as he begged for mercy. Saturn's body was completely destroyed, leaving only his charred bones. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Kamabaka, the revolutionary army analyzed the revelations made by Vegapunk. Dragon and the others came to the conclusion that the celestial dragons resided at the top of the Red Line because of a secret. The world was slowly sinking into the sea. The colossal structures built by slaves centuries ago were connected to this phenomenon. Dragon stated that if nothing were done, the world would go to war over habitable territory, and the situation would become unsustainable. On the giant's ship heading toward Elbaf, Luffy lamented not having been able to save Vegapunk. However, Lilith, upon regaining consciousness, brought a surprising revelation. The Vegapunks were still alive inside her. In a sense, that news reignited everyone's spirits. Smiling, Luffy thanked the giants for the rescue, and the crew celebrated with a feast out at sea. Elbaf, following the escape from Egghead, the Straw Hats find refuge alongside the legendary giant warrior pirates. With old allies and new companions, the group celebrates the partial victory with feasts and laughter, relieved to have rescued Vegapunk, or more precisely, his Lilith satellite. During the celebration, Dory and Brogy revealed the end of their century-long duel. They decided to return to Elbaf to seek weapons worthy of continuing their fight. Their presence strengthens the alliance and anticipates the arrival at the Kingdom of the Giants. Among the festivities, one touching moment stands out. Boni and her father, Bartholomew Kuma, gaze at the horizon together. After years of pain and manipulation, the silent reunion between father and daughter carries an emotional weight comparable to any battle. On the other side of the world, in Onigashima, the red-haired pirates capture Bartolomeo and the Barto Club, punishing them for having burned Shank's flag. Hongo imposes a cruel choice on Bartolomeo, either poison Luffy or face the consequences. Loyal to his idol, Bartolomeo chooses to drink the poison himself, which turns out to be harmless, merely a loyalty test. Shanks smiles, satisfied with the devotion shown to his rival. But Yasop reminds everyone that punishment is still in order. With a precise shot, he destroys the going Luffy senpai, leaving the Barto Club's fate uncertain. Meanwhile, Blackbeard returns to Hachinosu after defeating the Heart Pirates. Furious, he reprimands Pizarro for letting prisoners escape, but shares an important revelation. The secret of the poneglyphs is spreading, accelerating the race toward the One Piece. He declares war on everyone, emperors, marines, and world government, and praises Kuzan for capturing Garp, as well as celebrating his possession of Charlotte Pudding, whose eye ability can decipher the poneglyphs. Lafitte reports that he has infiltrated the Umit route, where the revolutionary army has been sabotaging food supplies to Mary Geos. At the same time, Katarina Devon and Van Augur return with Caribou as a prisoner and with revelations about the ancient weapons. 2 days after leaving Egghead, the giant warrior's ship heads for Elbaf, but an incident changes everything. The Thousand Sunny disappears, taking most of the Straw Hats with it. Only Robin, Frankie, Brook, Jinbei, Boni, and Lilith remain, with no clue as to the whereabouts of the others. In an unknown location, Nami wakes up confused, with a headache and wearing strange clothing. Upon reuniting with Usopp, the two flee from colossal creatures in a gloomy castle, until they find Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, who had already faced and even feasted with the beasts of the place. 5 Straw Hats have awakened in a strange location, wearing ceremonial clothing reminiscent of the giants of Elbaf. Everything around them seems enormous, and no one remembers how they got there, or what happened to the Thousand Sunny or the rest of the crew. Usopp puts forward a bold theory. Could they be in Elbaf and transformed into giants? The theory seems to gain traction when a stranger appears riding a giant grasshopper and greets them naturally, saying they are in the land of the gods, where colossal animals are treated as deities. He warns them about the dangerous temple of the sun god, but Luffy, impulsive as ever, runs straight toward it. Luffy ends up colliding with what appeared to be the sky, which turns out to be an enormous one-way mirror. Upon breaking it, the group discovers a hidden chamber and rescues Chopper, who had been trapped inside. They then uncover the truth. They were not in Elbaf at all, but rather inside a giant diorama, part of a bizarre collection where everything was simulated. The revelation is cut short by an attack from monstrous creatures, followed by the arrival of the self-proclaimed sun god, Road, a dissident member of the giant warriors, furious about the destruction of his collection. The Straw Hats flee riding Iskat, a giant feline, guided by Nami's sharp memory. During the escape, Road captures them with a metal net, but Zoro and Sanji break through the chains. Enraged, other captives rebel, revealing that the location was an ancient prison for giants, and that Road intended to use them in his revenge against Luffy, rejecting Hajruddin's alliance with the Grand Fleet. In the final confrontation, Nami orders Zeus to attack, while Luffy destroys the structure with Gear 4 Gum Gum Kongun, opening an escape route. Out at sea, Robin, Frankie, Brook, Jinbei, Boney, and Lilith still have no idea what happened to their friends. Despite the tense atmosphere, they decide to press on toward Elbaf, believing they can reunite with the others there. The mood worsens when they receive a newspaper with alarming news. Dory and Brogy now have bounties of 1.8 billion each, and Luffy is accused of assassinating Vegapunk. Worse still, the giants have been falsely linked to the attack on Egghead Island. Robin notices something odd in a newspaper image of Luffy in his Gear 5 form. An X marked on his arm, a detail that leaves her intrigued. Before she can investigate, a story emerges involving Hajruddin and a grave crisis in Elbaf. The giants explain that Hajruddin had to leave in a hurry due to a threat. The infamous Prince Loki. Known as the accused prince, Loki escaped his execution, murdered his father, King Harold, and consumed the powerful devil fruit that had belonged to the king. The giants are now trying to contain him before he causes a catastrophe. During the voyage to Elbaf, Robin decides to change her look and asks Brook to cut her hair to how it was before the time skip, hoping to be more easily recognized by Jaguar di Sol. Meanwhile, Luffy's group, after escaping from Road, finds themselves in a colossal castle connected to the mainland by a suspension bridge. Just as they are about to depart, two giants appear, Gerd and Goldberg of the New Giant Warrior Pirates. The Straw Hats hide and overhear the conversation. Road had taken the Thousand Sunny to Elbaf. With the giants moving away, the crew begins to cross the immense bridge. Along the way, Luffy hears a mysterious voice coming from the forest below and, impulsive as always, leaps down to investigate. Meanwhile, the others are pursued by Road, now covered in soot and electricity, accompanied by Gerd and Goldberg, who are carrying the Sunny. Zoro prepares for combat while the rest run to avoid the fight. In the forest, Luffy finds a blindfolded giant in chains. When he introduces himself as the future king of the pirates, the prisoner reveals his identity, Loki, the self-proclaimed sun god. He confirms that place is indeed Elbaf. Thrilled to have finally arrived in Elbaf, Luffy started talking non-stop, but was cut off by Loki, who asked to be set free. Chained for 6 years with seastone shackles to the treasure tree Adam in the gloomy underworld of Elbaf, Loki offered to eliminate any enemy crew in exchange for his freedom. To prove his strength, he summoned ancient colossal beasts and survivors who had once challenged Elbaf. Surprisingly, Luffy calmed them all with ease. What really caught his attention was the mention of Shanks. Loki mocked the Emperor, which irritated Luffy and sparked a brief confrontation. After an apology and a private conversation, the two reached a secret agreement. Luffy reunited with Gerd and Goldberg, who received him with relief at seeing him safe and sound, though intrigued by his silence about the underworld. Judging that he was shaken, they chose not to press him. Meanwhile, Zoro and the others had defeated Road, burying him in the forest of the Solar World. Gerd and Goldberg reprimanded Road for his conduct, while the giant warrior's ship arrived in Elbaf, crossing a majestic rainbow into the heart of the island. Along the way, they encountered Hajruddin and Stanson, who were hunting a rare elk to prepare a feast. During the crossing, the giants explained the structure of Elbaf, 3 vertical layers surrounding the immense treasure tree Adam, the underworld at the base, the solar world in the branches, and the celestial world at the crown, connected by the painters, cubes that generate navigable rainbows. By coincidence, all groups arrived together at Elbaf's western village. Enchanted by the beauty of the place, the Straw Hats reunited and celebrated their long-awaited destination. In the midst of the joy, a flashback recalls Robin's trauma following the Ohara incident, the world government's pursuit, and the moments when she nearly gave up on living, sustained only by Saul's words and the message left by her mother, Nico Olvia. Now, in contrast with that past, Robin is moved by the magical landscapes of Elbaf. Lilith comments on the unique atmosphere of the island, while Rode remains crucified in silence, as punishment for his deeds. After being welcomed by Hazrudin and his crew, the Straw Hats are invited to a feast. However, Robin makes one request. She wants to see Sol before the celebration. Everyone accompanies her to the Warrior's Fountain near the Owl Library, where Sol now teaches history. There, they are informed that Sal had fainted recently. Robin, composed, walks toward him. The reunion is touching. Sal surprises her with his old theatrical roar, and Robin smiles with warmth. They speak about Nico Olvia, Vegapunk's message, and the truth behind the destruction of Ohara, a reunion that seals the healing of old wounds. Soa reveals how he survived the Buster Call. The heat from the bombardments melted Aokiji's ice, allowing him to barely escape. Upon showing anger over Robin's suffering, she gently stops him, saying she no longer wants to live bound to the past. She only wants to be recognized for having survived. Those words move Saul deeply, and he embraces her tightly, finally expressing the pride he had always felt. Robin allows herself to break down, releasing years of pain and confessing how much she had missed him. Luffy watches in silence, but with a warm smile. Afterward, Luffy thanks Saul for having protected Robin in the past. Saul joyfully says he feels happy seeing her surrounded by friends strong enough to protect her. The warm atmosphere shifts when Lilith introduces herself as one of Vegapunk's satellites and reveals plans to build a new laboratory in Elbaf, with a clone of the original scientist coming from Egghead. Shortly after, a commanding giantess named Ange appears as the librarian of the mysterious Owl Library. She offers to guide part of the crew to the Morsa School, founded by Jaguar D. Sol 2 decades ago. With the group divided, Saul leads Robin, Chopper, Bonnie, and Lilith to the library, a sanctuary of knowledge with books adapted to the giant's size, many of them rescued from Ohara. Robin is moved to tears upon encountering this legacy, which exists only thanks to the efforts of the head librarian. Biblo, a user of the Swell fruit, which enlarges inorganic objects, is essential to the Morsa School. Meanwhile, the other Straw Hats discover that Elbaf no longer trains warriors. Teacher Ripley explains that a century ago, King Harold attempted to transform the kingdom into a peaceful commercial center, abandoning the warrior tradition. Ange reveals that those ideals were tragically cut short when Harold's son, Loki, murdered him. Since then, Elbaf has lived without a central government, in political instability. In parallel, Loki, imprisoned in the underworld, speaks via Denden Mushi with someone called Mosa. The tension escalates as they discuss past traumas, ending with Loki enraged, vowing to escape soon. In the western village, giants celebrate, until two hooded figures mysteriously appear at Arist Castle, using magic circles to transport themselves. At the Morsa School, Luffy joins Usopp and the giant children in a daring game of play, but gets scolded by Nami for frightening them. The fun stops when Colon, a young giant, challenges him with a sword, which shatters upon striking him. Luffy responds with the Gum Gum Elephant Gun, which misses but unbalances Colon. Surprisingly, Colon gives up the fight and reveals he is the son of Ripley and a human pirate, a relationship interrupted by the difference in life expectancy between them. Back at the Owl Library, the Straw Hats are given new clothes. Luffy organizes a reunion at the village for the next festivity, while Lilith and Bonnie decide to stay behind. At Arist Castle, the hooded figures confront giant guards and demand to know where Loki is. Faced with refusal, one of them launches projectiles and incapacitates one of the guards, making clear they will not accept a no for an answer. In the village, the Straw Hats are welcomed with a celebration in honor of the defeat of Kaido and Big Mom. Among those present is Jaru, the oldest giant, recognized by a helmet pierced by a sword, a dark symbol from Elbaf's history. During the festivities, Rode returns remorseful, revealing he had been manipulated by a dream of becoming the sun god and ruling the world. His words spark a debate among the giants about the true identity of that deity. Jaru mentions the Harley, an ancient religious text of Elbaf, known for its many interpretations and difficult translations. Even so, there is one common thread: The world was destroyed twice, and an entity called Nika played a crucial role in both events, though her true nature remains a mystery. Ja Rule believes that both Herald and Loki shaped their ideologies based on distinct visions of Nika. Since Loki's birth, Elbaf has suffered recurring tragedies, and ancient prophecies foretold that he would kill his own father. Ja Rule tried to stop him but was gravely wounded. Only the arrival of Shanks, 6 years ago, managed to defeat Loki and bring him to prison. That revelation ignites in Luffy the desire to find out more. He, Zoro, Nami, and Sanji set out for Orist Castle in search of the key to Loki's cell. Meanwhile, in the castle's underworld, the hooded figures reveal themselves to be members of the feared gods' knights. They offer Loki a place among them, but he refuses, stating that allying with them would be just as vile as the celestial dragons. Gunko, one of the knights, reveals that they had lost contact with their agents after a confrontation with a massive black crow. To pressure Loki, Gunko restrains a giant wolf with magic ribbons, threatening him. Faced with his continued refusal, she kills the animal, provoking in Loki a devastating fury and a desire for total destruction. Upon arriving at the castle, Luffy and his group find traces of destruction. There, Road reveals Loki's bloody past. He murdered Herald and more than 100 warriors in a brutal uprising. Only Ja Rule survived. Standing before a portrait of Herald, Road describes him as the greatest leader Elbaf had ever had. Someone who even removed his own horns in a symbolic gesture of breaking with warrior tradition. The most surprising revelation is that Hajruddin is Loki's half-brother, raised apart from the royal family because his mother was not originally from Elbaf. Road, in sympathy with him, hopes to see him unite the giants under a new banner. In the underworld, Gunko continues to torture Loki. The other knight, Figureland Shamrock, commander of the Gods' Knights and son of Garling, coldly suggests calling for reinforcements from Mary Geoise. He bluntly declares that Elbaf will be subjugated by the world government. Before leaving, Loki notices the resemblance between Shamrock and Shanks. Shamrock confirms he is Shanks' older twin brother. He recounts that Shanks did return to Mary Geoise, but rejected his celestial dragon title to live among common people. When scorned by Loki, Shamrock summons from his sword Cerberus, a three-headed monster armed with blades, which impales Loki brutally. Shamrock and Gunko then flee in a flying machine shaped like a bird, created with the powers of Gunko's devil fruit. Before leaving, Shamrock makes his next target clear, capturing the children of Elbaf, and orders Gunko to summon reinforcements. Meanwhile, Luffy and his group find two injured guards, who confirm they faced Shamrock and Gunko. One of them insists that one of the intruders was identical to Shanks. Luffy refuses the idea, saying Shanks never mentioned having a brother, but the guards suggest it may have simply been someone who looked very much like him. The conversation is interrupted by the approach of a mysterious figure from outside the castle. Elsewhere on the island, Ripley takes Frankie to the legendary treasure tree Adam, where they discover a mural from the Void Century depicting wars between races, possibly linked to the Great Purge and the fall of the Ancient Kingdom. At the Owl Library, Sol shows Robin and Chopper the Sacred Harley text, divided into 3 chapters, each depicting a distinct era. The first world ended in destruction. The second was marked by wars between those who followed the crescent moon and the followers of the moon's dream. The third, the current one, speaks of a laughing sun god who guides humanity toward an uncertain future. Exploring Orist Castle, the Straw Hats reach the throne room, where they are attacked by a giant axe. The attacker is Yasan, an old human pirate who has been living in Elbaf. He reveals that he is Ripley's companion and Kolan's father. Upon learning that Luffy wants to free Loki, he urges caution, but is ignored, which makes him smile as he is reminded of Roger. He then shows a secret room beneath the throne containing the key to Loki's chains, but proposes a duel for Luffy to earn it. Meanwhile, back in the western village, Oimo reveals that Yasan is in fact Skopper Gaban, the legendary left hand of Gol D Roger, known as the Mountain Crusher. The duel between Luffy and Gaban begins. Luffy tries to avoid the confrontation, but Gaban provokes him, forcing the fight. Using the Haki-coded key as a weapon, Gaban dominates the battle and goads Luffy by bringing up Shanks. Luffy grows furious, and Gaban takes the opportunity to slam him into the wall. When Gaban activates his powerful Yasutakeru Axe Strike, Zoro steps in, blocking the attack and saving Luffy. Luffy activates Gear 5, ready to fight seriously. However, Gaban ends the duel. The key is already with them. With a smile, he invites the group to pay a visit before they leave Elbaf, an invitation that is declined with irritation. At the Morsa school, Gunko attempts a magical summoning but accidentally brings in two God's Knights, Saint Summers and Saint Killingham. They announce that Shamrock has been summoned back to marry Giois due to the chaos following the end of the reverie. Killingham mentions that only those who bear the mark can cross the abyss alone. The rest require ships. Shamrock suggests turning the kidnapping of Elbaf's children into a twisted game. Meanwhile, Ripley teaches Frankie more about the legendary treasure tree Adam. The giants live in the highest branches, and the ancient village of Hogback was destroyed by a storm, revealing vulnerabilities in the territory. During a feast, Nami finds Usopp overcome with emotion at finally visiting Elbaf, while Sanji notices Gerard's absence as strange. Zoro, for his part, brings injured guards to Gerard, trying to conceal what truly happened. Suspicious, Gerard attacks Zoro and demands the truth about Luffy. In the underworld, Luffy and Zoro find Loki near death, badly beaten, with his animal companions injured. After arguing, they remove almost all of his chains, keeping only the sea stone shackle to suppress his powers. While Luffy goes to find help, the new giant warriors fall from the sky, with Sanji on board. Luffy cushions the fall, but the impact is violent. Hadrudan tries to prevent Loki's full release, arguing that he is dangerous, but to no avail. Loki rises, wounded, wielding his weapon Ragnarok. The atmosphere shifts, and a dark threat draws near. At the Morsa school, chaos erupts with the appearance of an enormous snake. Kiba and Salo react quickly and defeat it. But the situation worsens. Children in a trance walk toward the beach, guided by glowing arrows. Teacher Wolf warns that no one should touch them, but Salo, attempting to protect them, is wounded by invisible thorns. Soon, colossal creatures emerge from the forest, forcing the sentinels to sound the alarm. Ange notices something terrifying. The monsters appearing are exactly the fears drawn by the children hours before. Those nightmares have now taken form. From the top of the treasure tree Adam, the God's Knights observe everything with delight. Killingham, who ate the dream fruit, can materialize dreams. Summers, with the thorn fruit, controls invisible thorns. As they feast, they coldly comment that if the children die, they can always find more. Their plan, to take the children to marry Gioes. Back in the underworld, Loki, despite being weakened, threatens to destroy Elbaf if the last shackle is not removed. As proof, he summons a storm with the Ragnarok strike, setting the south of the island ablaze. Luffy attacks him, but Loki collapses, exhausted, revealing that he has already far exceeded his limits. Gerd begins first aid on Loki, estimating that his recovery will take months. It is discovered that his horns are an ancestral inheritance, passed down from his father, the legendary giant Herald. In the midst of the tension, Hazrudin nearly executes him, overwhelmed by past traumas, but hesitates when Loki, with calm, asks, "Do you really believe I killed our father on purpose?" Elsewhere on Elbaf, Frankie and Ripley explore an ancient technological facility hidden beneath roots. There, they find Lilith and Bonnie, who reveal that the location is over 3,000 years old, predating even the recorded history of the giants. The exploration, however, is interrupted by an entity created by Killingham, a living, electrified cloud, clearly artificial. At the same time, the western village is attacked by a giant skeletal figure and other creatures. Without Dory and Brogy, the local warriors fight as best they can. Despite orders to retreat, the Straw Hats volunteer to help. Nami reports the events to Jaru, while Jinbei suspects the monsters are the product of a devil fruit. Jaru then issues a general alert about the invasion. During the evacuation, the Straw Hats encounter Kolan, who offers his ship on the condition that he be the captain. When all seems lost, Dory and Brogy return and unleash their legendary attack, the Hakoku Sovereignty, destroying countless monsters in a single blow. Then Gaban arrives with the giant warrior pirates, reigniting hope. The battle for Elbaf continues, but now there is a glimmer of victory. Zoro, Sanji, and Goldberg descend into the underworld in search of supplies and end up facing a colossal creature, the fearsome Grokkisaurus. In a coordinated move, Sanji launches Zoro forward with a precise kick, allowing the swordsman to finish the dinosaur with a lethal slash. After the victory, Goldberg reveals a curious secret. His talking shield is actually a homie, created created during an ancient clash between his father and Big Mom, similar to Nami's Zeus. Meanwhile, in the Solar Village, the giant warrior pirates and Skapar Gaban battle monstrous creatures born from the children's nightmares, including threatening figures such as Draugr and Fenrir. The flames continue to spread, threatening to reach the sacred treasure tree Adam. Despite the efforts of the giant firefighters, it is Jinbei who takes the front line, using his technique to contain the fire and rescue the hypnotized youth. The situation worsens with the arrival of Gunko, one of the feared god's knights, who begins pursuing Crone, a young giant. Her presence confirms that the knight's threat has not ended even after the previous attacks. Gunko faces Usopp, Jinbei, Nami, Brook, and Colon. During the battle, she proclaims herself God, which leads Usopp to mock her, bringing up Enel and the celestial dragons themselves. Gunko reveals her true objective, to kidnap the children of Elbaf and take them to marry Jiosai. Even against Usopp's attacks and Nami's new electric technique, the Thunder Shark Tempo, Gunko demonstrates an impressive capacity for regeneration, comparable to that of the Five Elders. After defeating the group, she captures Colon. Meanwhile, Saint Killingham invades the Morsa school, defeats teachers Ange and Kiba, and takes control of Elbaf's broadcasting system, planning to use it to spread world government propaganda. In another part of the island, Jaguar D. Sol enters into battle with Shepherd Summers, another of the god's knights. Robin and Chopper hide in his hair while he fights. Gravely wounded, Sol asks the two to remain hidden so they can assist the children later on. During the confrontation, Summers openly criticizes King Harold for having guided Elbaf's giants down the path of peace, making his contempt for the island's current ideology plain to see. In an earlier flashback, Sol had instructed Robin and Chopper to avoid direct confrontation, explaining that the God's Knights are nearly immortal and extremely dangerous. He stresses that protecting the children is the priority. Back in the present, Saint Shepherd Sommers activates an enormous Denden Mushi to broadcast a message across all of Elbaf. He introduces himself as a dagger of the Holy Land and announces the kidnapping of 10 children, among them Colon, son of Skapar Gaban. In a threatening tone, he demands the destruction of schools and libraries, along with total submission to the world government, warning that the hostages will not be returned otherwise. In parallel, Gunko recaptures members of the Straw Hats using her mysterious powers. Upon recognizing Brook, she demands that he become her musical slave. Loyal to Captain Luffy, Brook refuses without hesitation, preferring death to betraying his honor. While Jinbei tries to find a way to nullify Gunko's powers, Robin and Gaban prepare to confront Shepherd Summers. Both vow not to allow the Knight's atrocities to continue, taking on the mission of protecting Elbaf and its young. Gunko, for her part, brings little Ronia to the edge of a cliff, threatening to throw her off if the giants do not comply with the world government's orders. Simultaneously, Summers reinforces his demand via broadcast. Either Elbaf's libraries and schools are destroyed, or the children will disappear forever. Nico Robin then faces Shepherd Summers directly. Using her powers, she hurls him away with dozens of arms after breaking his spine, only to discover that he quickly regenerates and counters with invisible thorns. However, the Robin that was struck was merely a clone. The real one was busy freeing the Straw Hats. Faced with the impasse, the elder Jarl makes a difficult decision. He orders the destruction of the Morsa school to save the children. Among the hostages, young Ylva says an emotional farewell to the school and library, telling them not to worry about her. Despite the plea, Jarl moves forward with the plan, aware that lives are at stake. At the moment Saint Summers attempts to capture the real Nico Robin, Skapar Gaban steps into his path, intercepting him with a precise cut that severs his hand. To everyone's surprise, Summers' limb does not regenerate. The confrontation reveals an old tension between the two, suggesting they share an unresolved past. Gaban then lands a deep blow to Summers' chest, further exposing his vulnerability. With complete mastery over his haki, Gaban demonstrates why he is considered a living legend, delivering a decisive wound to one of the world government's most feared warriors. Meanwhile, Gunko threatens to execute Kensuya Geban's son unless he surrenders. Using his observation haki, Geban realizes that even with his speed he cannot protect the boy in time. In a desperate act of sacrifice, he drops his weapon and surrenders. The surrender, however, does not stop Gonko from firing 3 arrows at him, piercing his body and hurling him off the colossal tree. During Gaban's fall, Gonko experiences a flash of memory, a woman crying and screaming "Father," suggesting a deep connection with her own past. This raises the possibility that she has a direct link to Brook, perhaps even a daughter or someone tied to his legacy. In that instant, Imu manifests their presence and takes control of Gunko's body, displaying impatience with the slowness of the god's knights. The entity reveals it is prepared to intervene directly, displaying the full extent of its power. Transformed into a demonic creature with wings, a trident, and a tail, Imu summons an arcane grimoire from which it draws a dagger and a colossal firearm. When Brogy attempts to intervene, he is struck brutally. His left fist is destroyed in a single blow. With the dark technique Devil's Contract, Imu corrupts Brogy's body, transforming him into a demonic titan with wings, horns, and a giant axe. Despite his wounds, Brogy rises with a sinister grin, claiming to be stronger than ever. Imu then casts the spell Domi Reversi, transforming Dori and other giant warrior pirates into demonized versions of Brogy, armed with tridents and of monstrous proportions. Each of them is now a living weapon, forged for destruction. As chaos spreads, Killingham reveals that he left the nightmare holes open on purpose, allowing creatures born from the deepest fears of Elbaf's inhabitants to keep emerging and even be resurrected at will. Imu then announces their plans. Elbaf will not be destroyed, but transformed into the heart of a new empire, the Mu regime, which will serve as a strategic base for future wars. To consolidate their dominion, Imu orders the demonized giants to eliminate Jarul, proclaiming Dori and Brogy as the new kings of Elbaf. Even in the face of the threat, Jarul refuses to back down. Upon receiving the news of the fall of his old allies, he raises his weapon and declares with firm resolve, "You should not say that to a proud warrior." Chaos breaks out in the solar world with the rampage of the demonized giants. Im reveals that the extermination will continue until the heart of Elbaf is subjugated, adding that the country would have been conquered long ago if Harald had not failed. The mothers of the giants step onto the front lines in an attempt to protect the children. Chopper uses Guard Point to cushion Skopper Gaban's fall into the underworld, saving him. Luffy detects Chopper. Upon learning that Gaban was a member of the Roger Pirates, he is left dumbfounded, and Gaban, semi-conscious, arrogantly raises 2 fingers to indicate his position as the second strongest member of the crew, after someone had claimed he was the third. Sensing Im's Conqueror's Haki explosion in the solar world, the group realizes the gravity of the situation. Hadorudin orders everyone to prepare to ascend. Loki warns that everyone will need him to deal with that threat. In an enigmatic scene, Loki receives a call from Mosa, who says she will need to pause their conversations for a while, but that the exchanges between them have always helped him, leaving Loki visibly troubled. While the new giant warrior pirates prepare an exit from the underworld, Gaban informs Luffy that the God's Knights are not immortal, and that the secret to defeating them lies in how one uses Conqueror's Haki. Hadorudin confronts Loki, demanding the truth about the day Harald died 14 years ago. Gaban reveals that he and Shanks were in Elbaf on that day and sensed an abnormal Haki, without seeing everything. In a parallel and moving scene, Gaban and Shanks talk in a bath prepared by Ripley. Shanks mentions that he had met Harald in Mary Geoise, sensed there were things they could not discuss there, and had hoped to speak with him before it was too late. The central flashback begins. 14 years ago, Loki and Jarl are summoned to Castle Arust. Upon entering, they are confronted with something shocking, Harald being stabbed by the royal guards themselves. A mysterious character, still hidden, simultaneously discovers the forbidden devil fruit of Elbaf. The chapter delves even deeper, 109 years in the past, showing a young Harald as a warmongering tyrant devastating a human village, a figure completely opposite to the pacifist king of legend. The flashback recedes 109 years. Harald finds a giantess named Ida performing in a circus in a human village. Convinced that she was being held captive, he attacks the village to free her, but Ida reprimands him with a slap, explaining that she works there voluntarily out of gratitude to the people who saved her from a shipwreck. This encounter transforms Harold. He stops seeing himself as superior, embraces coexistence with other cultures, and takes Ida to Elbaf, initiating an era of modernization and international alliances. Hajarudin is born from this relationship, 81 years before the present. However, the elders of Elbaf disapprove of the union with an outsider and arrange a marriage for Harold with Estrid, a giantess of pure Elbafian lineage, obsessed with omens and symbols of luxury. 63 years before the present, while Harold is at sea, Estrid gives birth to Loki. Upon seeing the baby's demonic slit eyes, she panics and declares him a cursed monster. She orders Loki to be thrown into the underworld and for everyone to say he was born dead. In an epic and painful scene, baby Loki begins to crawl his way back up through the treasure tree atom, refusing to die. Estrid falls ill shortly afterward, and every disaster that befalls Elbaf from that point on comes to be called Loki's curse. It is also revealed that Rox is Blackbeard's father. The flashback advances to Loki's childhood years in the solar world. A famine devastates Elbaf in the winter following Loki's birth, and the population blames the prince's curse. A desperate giant attempts to kill Hadrudin and Ida, believing it would end the curse. Harald returns and saves them. Through diplomacy, he manages to have allied nations send supplies to everyone. When Estrid finally dies, tragedy deepens. She refused to acknowledge Loki until the very end, and the guards force him to wear bandages over his eyes to hide his abnormal appearance. Loki grew up without a mother's love, raised by Estrid's uncle, who hated him equally. Ida opens a tavern in the underworld open to everyone. 7 years later, Harald discusses with Jarul his difficulties with the world government. Jarul mentions a mysterious group called Galela, giant warriors who were captured while sailing distant seas. Decades later, a young Loki continues to wander the nation, intimidating Hadrudin and destroying everything around him in his solitude. It is then that Rox D. Zebek appears, having deliberately wounded Loki to force a meeting with Harald. The flashback recedes to show Rox D. Exebek 56 years before the present. It is revealed that Rox had caused chaos at a world council. He kidnapped 5 kings, invaded Mary Geoise, and confronted him directly in the flower room, declaring he would return as Davy Jones' pirate. Gunko was present at that moment. Rox was the only one to walk away alive from a confrontation with a marine admiral, destroyed a gates of justice, and plundered the celestial tribute. Over the years, he built his crew through Davy backfight battles, recruiting a young Whitebeard, Shiki, Buckingham Stussy, Don Marlon, Ochoku, and Ganzue. Back in Elbaf, Rox explains his grand plan to Harald: conquer Hachinosu as a base and then use 2 legendary devil fruits to bring down the world government and become king of the world. 4 years later, his plans would finally come to fruition. 44 years before the present, Rox takes Hachinosu with his crew, at that time including a young 15-year-old Kaido and a 24-year-old Big Mom, in a comedic and iconic sequence. Kuja pirates terrorize the seas by pillaging anyone who crosses their path, using both their strength and the overwhelming beauty of their warriors, to the point where Roger and the Roger pirates are too dazzled to fight, with Roger being infatuated with Shakuyaku, and Gloriosa being infatuated with Roger. In Hachinosu, at a famous bar, Roger meets Rox and his crew. The house rules forbid fighting. In Elbaf, Harald had secretly accepted the terms of the 5 elders to integrate Elbaf into the world government, and Rox, furious, says they are merely using the giants as mercenaries. Harald counters that, as wicked as the world nobles are, they hold the power needed to integrate Elbaf into the civilized world and put an end to the giants' violent past. Rox believes the only way to bring down the world government is with the giants on his side. 42 years before the present, Harald intervenes in a control operation over a nation called Enishi, not aligned with the government, and this temporarily ruins his credibility with the nobles. He mentions having spoken with Garp and notes that giants like John Giant have enlisted in the Marines. In a tavern, Hadrudin and Loki appear side by side, still not speaking to each other. In the Chamber of Authority, the 5 elders finally reach an agreement. Elbaf will be allowed to join the world government, but only if Harald kills Rox. The Rox pirates continue to grow and gain power. In a touching and melancholic scene, Rox and Harold drink together in a final conversation. Rox insists that the entire nation should join him, should give up this reverence for the government. Harold refuses, but the mutual respect between them is evident in every panel. The Roger pirates receive news that Shaki has opened her bar in Hachinosu and set out to visit her. Roger apparently in a bad mood. Rayleigh receives a letter from Shakuyaku confirming the depth of the romantic bond between the two. Even knowing about the letter, Roger does not give up trying to win her over. After Harold accepts the Elder's terms, Rox returns to Elbaf for one last recruitment attempt and finds a changed Harold. The two face each other in a battle that ends in a draw while debating about the world government. The encounter definitively ends their friendship. The two would never see each other again. In God Valley, 39 years prior, Shanks and Shamrock are born with red hair, while the island's community looks after the children in their father's absence. 38 years before the present, Garling and the Marines invade God Valley to organize the native hunting competition, an absurd practice disguised as entertainment for the world nobles. The grand prize of the competition, Shakuyaku, captured by the nobles, along with other treasures and devil fruits. Among the targets of the hunt are also members of the Davy family, including Rox's wife and son, Eris and Marshall the 500th. Teach, Rox reveals he is a descendant of Davy Jones, his full name being Davy the 500th, Zebek, and that his family was deliberately placed in God Valley as targets. This completely recontextualizes his motivations. He did not go to God Valley out of greed or power, but to save the family he loved. Dragon, still a Marine officer, is assigned to protect the nobles. The gathering of legends on a single island, Roger, Garp, Rox, Whitebeard, Kaido, Big Mom, Dragon, Garling, and others, foreshadows the historical cataclysm to come. The native hunting competition formally begins. Members of the Davy family are presented to the world nobles as prey. Chaos erupts when the Rox pirates arrive from the south and the Roger pirates from the north, each with their own objectives. The world nobles, terrified, flee in a stampede. Garling laments that the competition ended early because of the pirates. Dragon finds the babies Shanks and Shamrock in the midst of the chaos and begins running with them at the request of the children's mother. The God's Knights spring into action to protect the nobles. Garp arrives with his fleet and begins attacking opportunistic pirates, while the Marines cheer at the arrival of their hero. The battlefield becomes utter chaos, with multiple groups fighting each other with no clear allies. Dragon continues fleeing with the babies Shanks and Shamrock. God's Knight Maffy takes Shamrock from Dragon by force, not realizing they were twins, believing she had completed her mission. Garp attacks the pirates, trying to take advantage of the confusion, including members of the Rox pirates. Rayleigh and Gaban find Shaki confined. She had defeated several Marines on her own, even while chained, and set off to get her to safety. Kuma, still young, uses the pawpaw fruit silently to save over 500 people trapped on the island and civilians, teleporting them off the island. Ivankov and Ginny are also present. The scene demonstrates that God Valley was an event that shaped not only the great names of piracy, but also future revolutionaries like Dragon, Kuma, and Ivankov. While Rayleigh flees with Shaki, all pirates in God Valley turn their attention to the treasure at the center of the island. Rox saves Eris and the young Teach, future Blackbeard, from the Celestials' pursuit, and Eris asks Rox to find her in Lulusia. The most epic scene is the theft of the devil fruit. Big Mom grabs the fruit with the intention of giving it to Katakuri, but Kaido surprises her and strikes her face with his kanabo, immediately eating the fruit, transforming for the first time into his iconic dragon and declaring his new ability. Im, fearing the unpredictable chaos, descends upon God Valley by possessing Saturn's body in his monstrous form. Rox, Whitebeard, and Kaido, already in dragon form, unite to face him, and when Whitebeard asks what they are facing, Rox answers, the world. Imu, possessing Saturn, attacks both Marines and pirates alike. Rox advances against Imu, speaking of a promise. Captain John reveals he possesses the Mag fruit and attempts to escape with the treasure, but Ganzui stops him. Meanwhile, Dragon loses Shanks when John uses his magnetic power to attract the treasure chest. The most devastating moment. Garp, Roger, Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, and a Celestial Lineage member all simultaneously strike Imu with Conqueror's Haki, but Imu simply regenerates from everything. Then Imu tells Rox that he will make him kill his own family and transforms him into a demon with the Domi Reversi. Before surrendering to Imu's power, Rox resists and tries to provoke Imu over Davy the 500th. Jones and Joy Boy, enraging Imu declares that Elbaf and Harold will be subjugated. In demonic form, Rox attacks Kaido and Big Mom and destroys the mountain of God Valley, nearly killing Eris and Teach, but Kuma appears and teleports them off the island. Following this, Garp and Roger confront Rox to stop him. The most emotional moment. Everyone hears Rock's own voice begging to be killed. He was resisting the transformation with every ounce of his strength, something even Imu himself admitted was extraordinarily persistent. The remaining pirates and marines flee God Valley. Garp and Roger join forces to fight Rox, but initially cannot break through his defenses. Imu orders all records of God Valley to be erased. Roger and Garp cannot cause any damage to Rox. The two conclude that only a massive concentration of Conqueror's Haki will cause permanent damage, and they launch their combined attacks against Rox, defeating him. As God Valley begins to sink into the ocean, Garling kills Rox, and Gaben and Rayleigh carry an exhausted Roger and Garp to safety. Later, the Roger pirates discover baby Shanks inside one of the treasure chests looted from the island. The aftermath, news of the Rox pirates' defeat spreads quickly, presenting Garp as a hero, to Garp's own frustration. Dragon, under arrest, declares he will abandon the Marines and tells his father he despises him. Garp then hands his son a key to escape, and Harold, crushed by shame and grief over having left Rox to die, travels to Marineford and tears off his own horns as a symbol of his dedication to a peaceful future. 5 years after the God Valley incident, Harold was working for the world government eliminating pirates, becoming known as a monster in the mists. He meets Shanks in Marigiosu. Shanks was trying to gather information about the government and was on his way to becoming a god's knight. The painful moment. In Elbaf, Ida falls ill after being poisoned by the elders from Estrad's hometown. This drives Loki to attack the village and set it ablaze, screaming that Ida is his only mother. Ida dies on a snowy day. Harold and Hajrudin weep for her, while Loki suffers in silence, imprisoned. With Shanks having disappeared before being promoted to God's Knight, Harold is chosen in his place. Harold meets Imu, who grants him immortality and makes him a god's knight, then orders him to create the Circle of the Abyss in Elbaf, and afterward a giant army for the government. However, Harold refuses to turn his people into the government's weapons, and asks his guards to imprison him and summon his sons and Jarul. Shanks explains that he went to Elbaf to tell Harold not to accept the position of God's Knight. Harold reveals to Loki, Jarul, and the soldiers that he worked for the government and was betrayed by them. The flashback reaches its climax. Harold tells Loki to take Elbaf's legendary devil fruit, kill him, and take the throne. He soon loses control, attacks the guards, and stabs Jarul through his helmet. But Shanks intervenes. When Loki enters the room to eat the fruit and take the hammer, he is attacked. The one attacking was the hammer itself, which after shattering Loki's hammer undoes his transformation. Harald's battle reaches its limit. Loki receives Ragnir, the spirit that chose him as its first worthy bearer in centuries, and becomes the first in a very long time to wield it. Harald reveals that no one was able to eat Elbaf's legendary devil fruit before because Ragnir had not chosen anyone. Gaban and Shanks continue trying to stop Harald as the drama intensifies. With this and Elbaf's legendary devil fruit, Loki becomes powerful enough to completely overpower Harald. Loki then delivers an extraordinarily powerful blow to Harald. After reluctantly killing Harald, Loki takes the surviving guards with him to sea, asking Jarul, Gaban, and Shanks to keep the truth a secret. Back in the present, the emotional revelation, Hajrudin forgives Loki for the circumstances of Harald's death and frees him. The 14-year-old flashback comes to an end, and Loki demonstrates his power to the Straw Hats by attacking one of the demon warriors. Jarl and Skapar Gaban finally confirm the truth about the death of King Harald to everyone, proving Loki's innocence. The people had been led to believe that the prince was the regicide because of a necessary lie. Loki had taken all the blame upon himself to preserve the peace his father had built. Imu, upon seeing that his great warrior had been defeated, understood that in Elbaf there exists a tremendous power. He warns the elders not to forget that Elbaf is a D. Hajruddin. Now understanding the full story, releases his brother. Gaban explains the situation regarding the children and the enemy's powers. Jarl recounts all past events to the people of Elbaf, omitting and simplifying the story so everyone can understand, proving Loki's innocence and driving the people of Elbaf to fight with all their strength against the world government and its demons. Zoro enters the battle, leaping over the demonized giants, using a technique that causes Dory and Brogy to slash each other. Brook, dragging himself across the ground, confronts Gunko, calling her Princess Shuri, recognizing her features and revealing that she killed someone who had been his benefactor. The shock causes Gunko to briefly resist Imu's control, freeing the Straw Hats from the arrows before being dominated again. Meanwhile, the giant parents face a monster in the form of an evil Nika to protect their children. Gerd, Goldberg, and Rode combine their powers and pierce through it, but the monster is repelled by Sommer's club and ends up sinking the very ship that was to be used to kidnap the children, to Sommer's despair. With the ship destroyed and a hole opened in the clouds, the giant children, still controlled by Gunko's arrows, advance toward the edge of the island. In an emotional scene, the parents refuse to let them go and fall alongside them into the underworld. Loki saves them by transforming into the enormous dragon Nidhogg, carrying everyone to safety while destroying dream monsters along the way. Dragon Loki dominating the skies of Elbaf, with Luffy in Gear 5 and Ragnir as a squirrel upon him, while lightning and snow cover everything. Sanji frees Robin from the vines with Diablo Jambe. Zoro blocks Summer's thorns that were threatening the wounded family members. Luffy then launches his attack with the Dawn Thor rifle, a punch that electrocutes and destroys Summers at the same time, followed by Loki stomping down on top of him. In a flashback, Jarl explains that Loki's devil fruit is the mythical Zoan model, Nidhogg. The larger the user, the greater the potential the dragon reaches, which in an ancient giant is devastating. He also reveals the legend of a warrior deity who transformed into this dragon to battle the sun god, whose servant spirit Ratatosk came to inhabit the hammer Ragnir. In the present, Loki fires Thor Heim and sweeps away most of the dream monsters. In Mary Geos, Imu is furious upon discovering that Nidhogg was in Elbaf all along. Lilith uses a converter to absorb the heat from the fires, freezing the school and the library, and transforms that energy into super heavy glue for Frankie. Jinbei, Sanji, and a powered-up Frankie together bring down the monster that had swallowed Zeus, while Sanji crushes Killingham after he insults Jinbei for being a fishman. On the main battle side, Dory and Brogy slash each other's heads off, and this reverses the Domi Reversi on them, bringing them back to normal and fully recovered. Zoro, Dory, Brogy, Hashruddin, and Stanson gather together, smiling and looking menacing, ready to kill each demonized giant, knowing it restores them. Zoro and the liberated giants mass attack the remaining giants under the Domi Reversi. Chopper in Monster Point also joins the fight, using a reversal technique. Usopp, furious, faces Imu, who is in Gunko's body, and accuses him of being a coward for using hostages and forcing warriors to fight each other, demanding he fight with honor. Imu strikes him repeatedly, declaring coldly and sovereignly that a ruler does not need to dirty his own hands. Usopp attempts to fight back, but Imu feels nothing, and the explosion catches them both. Both Usopp and Brook fall unconscious. Luffy arrives and finds his two crewmates defeated on the ground and is visibly furious. Imu, in Gunko's body, declares that the battle between Nika and Nidhogg will divide the world. Luffy repositions Brook and Usopp next to Sanji's group, while Loki attempts to attack Imu but without success. During the confrontation, Imu assumes a black form similar to the one seen in God Valley, and directly attacks Luffy and Loki with an ability called Domi Reversi, which apparently has no effect on the two. Luffy responds with a Gatling-style barrage, while Loki, in human form, uses Ragnir to freeze Imu. Despite the impact, Imu's body vanishes from the ice. In the end, Luffy returns to his exhausted state after spending all his energy. In Mary Geois, Imu informs the Gorosei that he will be temporarily withdrawing from the castle. That was the complete summary of One Piece. I really enjoyed working on it, but it took an enormous amount of effort. Weeks focused on this. Let's hype this work up even more. Leave a hype on the video. Go ahead, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. Subscribe to this channel focused on summaries. 2 more summaries are on the screen. I'll see you there.